The offer in the shadows. She scrubbed floors for a living. He owned the building. When he offered her 6 months of her life in exchange for everything she'd ever wanted, she said yes, and walked straight into a world that would never let her leave. Before we go any further, do me a favor. Hit that like button and drop the name of the city you're watching from in the comments. I want to see how far this story travels tonight. Stay with me until the very end, because what starts in a rain-soaked kitchen in the first 5 minutes becomes something you won't see coming. Trust me, you'll want to be there when it happens. The rain had been coming down for 6 hours straight, and Lena Cross could hear every drop of it through the cracked vent above the industrial sink. The Meridian Hotel kitchen was empty except for her. It was almost 1 in the morning, and the dinner rush had ended 4 hours ago. But somebody, probably Marco, the night shift manager who hated her for reasons she'd never bothered to figure out, had left a pile of sauté pans stacked so high they leaned against the tile backsplash like a bad idea waiting to fall. Grease had hardened on the bottoms. The steel wool in her hand was the third one she'd gone through tonight, and her knuckles had split open somewhere around pan number 11. She didn't stop scrubbing. She couldn't afford to stop scrubbing. "Cross? You still here?" Marco's voice came from the walk-in cooler behind her. She didn't turn around. She'd learned in the 8 months she'd worked at the Meridian that turning around when Marco spoke was a mistake. Turning around made it a conversation. Conversations with Marco ended with more work, or worse, with him standing too close, breathing through his nose like he was trying to figure out whether she was worth the effort of being cruel to. "Yeah," she said. "Almost done. Grill needs scraping before you clock out." She stopped scrubbing, just for a second, just long enough to close her eyes and count backward from 5, which was something her mother used to do when the bills came in and the electricity got shut off and there was nothing in the fridge but ketchup packets and a half-empty thing of mustard. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Then you open your eyes and you deal with it, because nobody else is going to. "The grill was Javier's tonight," she said. "Javier went home." "Yeah, I know, 2 hours ago." Marco let that hang in the air. She heard him shift his weight, heard the soft squeak of his rubber-soled shoes on the wet tile. She could feel him staring at the back of her neck. "You got a problem, Cross?" "No problem. Because if you got a problem, you can walk. Door's right there. I got a stack of applications in my office from girls who'd scrub that grill with their tongue for what I'm paying you." Lena turned the faucet off. The silence that rushed in behind it was so complete she could hear the rain hitting the dumpsters in the alley, could hear her own breathing, could hear the old refrigeration unit clicking on and off like it was thinking about dying. "I'll do the grill," she said. "That's what I thought." She waited until she heard the walk-in door swing shut, waited until his footsteps disappeared down the hall toward the office, and then she let her forehead rest against the cold steel of the sink. Just for a moment, just long enough to remember how to breathe. She was 24 years old. She had $11.43 in her checking account. She had rent due in 6 days, $475 for a room above a laundromat in a neighborhood where the sirens never really stopped. She had a hospital bill for her mother's final 3 weeks that she'd been making $30 payments on for almost 2 years, and the balance somehow kept going up instead of down because of something a man on the phone had called compounding interest, which she understood the way a person drowning understands water. She had a father she hadn't spoken to since she was 9. She had no siblings. She had a cat named Biscuit, who was probably, at this exact moment, sitting in her apartment window waiting for her to come home and feed him the generic dry food she bought in 10-pound bags from the dollar store. She had this job. She had the rain. She had a grill to scrape. She pushed off the sink. The grill was worse than she expected. Javier had run burgers all night, and he hadn't cleaned between rushes the way he was supposed to. Black carbonized grease had built up in the grooves like tar. She grabbed the scraper and went to work. It was maybe 15 minutes later. She'd lost track, the way you do when your shoulders are burning and your hands have gone from hurting to numb to hurting again. When she realized someone was standing in the doorway of the kitchen, not Marco. She would have heard Marco. Marco walked like a man who wanted you to know he was walking. This was different. This was a man who'd been standing there for a while, watching, and she'd only noticed him because some animal part of her brain had finally caught up to what her eyes had been seeing in the reflection of the stainless steel hood above the grill. She didn't turn around. Not right away. She kept the scraper moving. She said without looking up, "Kitchen's closed, dining room's closed. Lobby bar's open till 2 if you're looking for a drink." "I'm not looking for a drink." His voice was quiet. Not quiet the way men are quiet when they're trying to seem dangerous. Quiet the way a man is when he doesn't need to raise his voice because he's never had to in his life. She turned around. He was standing just inside the swinging door, one hand in the pocket of a coat that probably cost more than her rent for a year. Black wool. The kind of black that only looks that black when it's wet and new. He was maybe 30, maybe a little older. Dark hair cut short and careful. A face that wasn't handsome so much as it was assembled. Every feature exactly where it was supposed to be. Nothing wasted. His eyes were gray, and they were looking at her like she was a problem he already knew the answer to. He was soaked, not dripping, but damp enough that she could see where the rain had come through the shoulders of the coat. He'd walked here. Or he'd walked to wherever his car was, and then he'd walked here. Either way, he'd chosen to be wet, which wasn't something rich men usually did. Because he was rich. She knew that before he said another word. She'd worked service jobs since she was 15, and you learned to spot money the way a sailor learns to spot weather. It wasn't the coat was just the evidence. It was the way he stood. Like the floor had been put there for him specifically, like gravity was something he paid for. "You're not supposed to be back here," she said. "No. There's a sign. I saw it." She tightened her grip on the scraper. Not as a weapon, not really, just because her hand wanted to hold something. "So what are you doing back here?" He took a step into the kitchen. The fluorescent lights caught him fully for the first time, and she saw that his eyes weren't just gray. They were the color of wet concrete, flat and cold and paying complete attention. "You're Lena Cross," he said. Her stomach did something complicated. "Do I know you?" "No." "Then how do you know my name?" He didn't answer that. He took another step. He stopped about 8 feet away from her, which she registered as deliberate, close enough to talk, far enough that she wouldn't feel cornered. He had thought about where to stand. He had thought about it before he walked in. "Your mother was Evelyn Cross," he said. "She died on March 19th of the year before last, at St. Agnes Medical Center. Pancreatic cancer. You were with her." The final bill, after insurance, came to $87,412. You've paid $1,160 of it. At your current rate, you will finish paying it off in approximately 240 years, which of course you will not, because the interest is accruing faster than your payments. The scraper slipped out of her hand. It hit the tile with a sound like a dropped coin. "Who are you?" "Your landlord is a man named Boris Kaminsky. He's been renting the room above his business to you at a reduced rate because his son went to high school with a friend of your mother's. He sold the building 2 weeks ago. The new owner is raising rents across all 3 units by 60% starting next month. You haven't been informed of this yet because the notice was sent to the address on file at the bank, which is your mother's old apartment, which was cleared out and re-rented 9 months ago." Lena took a step back. Her hip hit the edge of the grill. She didn't feel it. "You have a cat," he said. "Biscuit. Orange tabby. 14 pounds, which is overweight for his build. He was diagnosed with chronic kidney disease at his last vet appointment, which you took him to 11 months ago. He's due for a follow-up. You haven't scheduled one because the follow-up would cost more than you can pay, and if they told you he needed prescription food or medication, you wouldn't be able to afford that either, and you would have to make a decision you're not ready to make." He said all of this the way another man might read a weather report. Nothing performative, no pleasure in it, just information. "Stop," she said. He stopped. The rain was loud in the vent above them. Somewhere far away in the hotel, a vacuum cleaner was running. Her heart was beating so hard she could feel it in her teeth. "I'm going to call the police," she said. "You're not. Watch me. Lena." He said her name the way you say a name when you've been saying it in your head for a long time before you finally say it out loud. "If I wanted to hurt you, I wouldn't have knocked. You didn't knock." "I did. You didn't hear me. You were doing the grill." She stared at him. He held her gaze. He didn't blink. She was the one who looked away first. "What do you want?" "I want to offer you a job." She actually laughed. Came out cracked and ugly, and she didn't care. "A job?" "Yes." "Doing what?" Washing a better class of pans? No? Then what? He considered her for a long moment. She had the strange feeling that he was deciding something, even though she was sure he'd decided it before he walked through the door. Men like him didn't improvise. Men like him wrote the script and then pretended to read from it. "My name is Adrian Vale," he said. "I need a woman to appear at my side in public for the next 6 months. Events, dinners, travel. You would be introduced as my companion. You would not be required to perform any sexual acts. You would not be required to lie about who you are, only to not volunteer information I don't ask you to volunteer. You would live in my home. You would be clothed, fed, trained in the specific etiquette of the rooms you'll be entering. You would be paid." She waited. He said, "At the end of 6 months, regardless of outcome, your mother's hospital debt will be paid in full. Your cat's medical care will be covered for the remainder of his life. You will receive, in a separate account in your name, the sum of $1,200,000. Your rent will be covered for the duration of our arrangement. You will owe me nothing when the 6 months are over. You may walk away. Most people do." The refrigeration unit clicked on. The fluorescent light above the prep station flickered once and steadied. "Most people?" she said. "This isn't the first time I've done this." "How many times?" 3. "Why? Why do I do it, or why you?" "Both. I have reasons I'm not going to share with a stranger. As for why you, I'll answer that when you're not a stranger, if you'd like. Or I won't, that's up to you." She was aware, suddenly, of how she must look to him. Hair pulled back in a rubber band because she'd lost the hair tie 3 shifts ago. A grease stain on her left cheek she hadn't noticed. Her mother's old sneakers, the soles coming loose at the toe. Her apron was an inch too long and the strings had been retied so many times the knot was a lump. "I'm a dishwasher," she said. "I know. I have a community college degree I didn't finish. I'm on my feet 12 hours a day. I smell like other people's food. My hands look like this." She held them up, palms toward him, because why not? The split knuckles, the red water-swollen fingertips, the burn scar on the inside of her right wrist from the dish machine when she was new and reached in before it had finished its cycle. "You want me to stand next to you at dinners?" "Yes." "With what people?" "People who have never had to look at hands like yours." She laughed again. This time it wasn't cracked. It was sharp. "So I'm what? The joke? You walk in with the dishwasher, see how they react?" "No." "Then what?" "You're the fact. They don't get to know what you are. I don't tell them. You don't tell them. They make assumptions. I let them. The point isn't to trick them. The point is that it doesn't matter what they think because what I say is what's true in the room, and what I say is that you are with me." Something cold moved through her. Not fear exactly. Something adjacent. "I don't believe you," she said. "You don't have to. I don't believe that's all it is. Nobody pays that kind of money for somebody to stand next to them." "You're right," he said. She waited. He didn't elaborate. The silence went on long enough that she heard Marco's voice somewhere far down the hallway, shouting at someone over the phone, probably the night auditor. Marco was always shouting at the night auditor. "I could be a terrible person," Lena said. "You don't know me." "I know you, Lena." "No, you don't. You know my mother's hospital bill. Those are not the same thing." He tilted his head just a fraction. The first real expression she'd seen on his face. It might have been the start of a smile. It might not have been. "All right," he said. "Test me." "What?" "Ask me something I shouldn't know." She stared at him. She wanted to say, "Get out." She wanted to pick up the scraper and throw it at his head. She wanted to call the police. She wanted to go home to Biscuit and eat the last cup of instant ramen and sleep for 14 hours and wake up and pretend this had never happened. Instead, she said, "What's the name of the first dog I ever had?" "You never had a dog. Your mother was allergic. You had a goldfish named Captain when you were 7. It lived for 11 months. You buried it in a jewelry box in the yard behind the apartment you lived in on Halsted. The box belonged to your grandmother. You told your mother you'd lost it, and she believed you because you'd never lied to her about anything important before." Lena's knees almost went. She put her hand on the edge of the grill to steady herself. She felt the heat of it through the towel that was draped over the handle, and she didn't move her hand because the heat was a thing she could feel, and she needed to feel a thing. "How?" she said. He didn't answer. "How do you know that?" I spent a lot of money finding out. On me? Yes. Why me? Out of everyone in this city, in this country, why am I the one you're standing here talking to? He was quiet for a long moment. The rain was still coming down. The refrigeration unit clicked off. Because when I needed someone who would be underestimated, he said, I needed someone who had already survived being underestimated. She didn't know what to say to that. He reached into the inside pocket of his coat and pulled out a card. White, thick, no logo. A phone number printed in black and nothing else. He set it on the edge of the prep counter next to a tub of kosher salt. Don't decide tonight, he said. Sleep on it. If you want to say no, throw the card away. I won't come back. If you want to say yes, call the number. A car will come for you in the morning. If I say yes, she said, what happens between now and the morning? You finish your shift. You go home. You feed your cat. You pack what matters to you, which won't be much because most of what matters to you you can't put in a bag. You think about whether you can live with what I am because you don't know what I am yet, and you're going to find out. And once you find out, you can't unfind out. What are you? He looked at her. The gray eyes didn't move. A man, he said, who gets what he asks for. Med. Marco came back into the kitchen 40 minutes after Adrian Vale walked out of it. He came in from the cooler side yelling about something she couldn't focus on. Something about the rotation of the ice machine bin liners. Something she was supposed to have done on Tuesday. She stood there at the grill, scraper back in her hand, and she let his words hit her and slide off. And she watched his mouth move without hearing him, because all she could hear was her own brain playing the conversation back at her on a loop. Captain, you buried it in a jewelry box. You told your mother you'd lost it, and she believed you. Her mother had believed her. That had been the terrible part. That had been the part Lena had never told anyone. Her mother had held her while she pretended to cry over the lost jewelry box, had stroked her hair and said, "It's okay, baby, it's just a box." And Lena had never in her life felt smaller or more wrong than she did in that moment. And she had sworn, silently, with her face pressed into her mother's shoulder, that she would never lie to her mother again. She had kept that promise. For 15 years, until her mother died, she had not lied to her once. And now a man in a wet wool coat had walked into her kitchen and named it. Cross. Are you listening to me? Cross. She blinked. Marco's face was very close. He was maybe 6 inches from her, and there was a speck of something white in the corner of his mouth that she couldn't identify and didn't want to. Sorry, she said. I asked you a question. Yeah, sorry, say it again. I said, who the hell was that? She didn't answer for a second. Marco's eyes were small and wet and angry. Who was who? Don't play stupid. The guy in the coat. I saw him on the camera in the hallway. He walked through my kitchen like he owned it, and you just stood there talking to him. He was lost. He was lost. Yeah, looking for the bathroom. For 45 minutes he was looking for the bathroom. I don't know what to tell you, Marco. He stepped closer. She felt the grill behind her, and she didn't step away, because stepping away was what he wanted. If you're doing something on the side of my kitchen, Cross, I swear to... Marco. I will fire you so fast, Marco. Something in her voice stopped him. She hadn't meant to put it there. She hadn't known it was in her to put there. But she'd just spent 45 minutes being seen, truly, accurately, uncomfortably seen, by a man who knew the name of her dead goldfish. And whatever that experience had done to her, it had used up all her patience for Marco for the night. Possibly forever. I'm going to finish this grill, she said, and then I'm going to go home. And if you want to fire me, you can fire me tomorrow, because right now I am not in the mood. He opened his mouth. He closed it. He stared at her like he'd never really looked at her before. You got something going on, Cross? No. You got something going on. Go to bed, Marco. He went. He muttered something on the way out that she didn't catch, and she didn't care that she didn't catch it, and she realized as the door swung shut behind him that she was shaking. Not from fear, from adrenaline, from the sudden, unfamiliar sensation of having spoken to another person without trying to make herself smaller. The card was still on the prep counter next to the kosher salt. She finished the grill. She mopped the floor. She hung up her apron in the locker they shared between shifts, and she took off the hairnet, and she pulled the rubber band out of her hair and shook it loose, and then put it back up in a messier version of the same bun because it was raining and because there was no one to see. She picked up the card on the way out. Boss, the bus was late. Of course it was. The 34 was always late on Tuesday nights because of something to do with a shift change at the depot that nobody had ever been able to explain to her satisfaction. She stood under the awning of the closed-down pharmacy across from the hotel and watched the rain and waited. A woman was sleeping on the bench inside the shelter. Lena didn't know her name, but she knew her face. She was always on this route, always on this bench, always curled up under the same green wool blanket that had gotten darker over the months as it absorbed more and more rain. Lena had given her a granola bar once, maybe 8 months ago. The woman had looked at the granola bar like she didn't know what it was, and then she'd looked at Lena the same way. Lena stood in the rain instead of joining her in the shelter, because the shelter was the woman's, and she didn't want to take it. She thought about what Adrian Vale had said. People who have never had to look at hands like yours. She looked at the woman on the bench. She looked at her own hands. She looked at the card in her palm, which was getting wet, even though she was trying to hold it under the edge of her jacket. The number was still legible. 10 digits, black on white. The bus came. It was 18 minutes late. She got on. She took a seat near the back. She watched the woman on the bench disappear as the bus pulled away, and she pressed her forehead against the cold glass, and she closed her eyes, and she tried not to think about Adrian Vale, and she thought about nothing else the entire way home. Biscuit was at the window. She saw him from the street as she came up the block, a soft orange lump in the second-story window above the laundromat, eyes catching the streetlight. He was, as always, exactly where she'd left him. She climbed the stairs. The landlord had started calling them the stairs of death last year, and she'd started agreeing. And she let herself into the apartment, and Biscuit came to her and did the thing where he wound around her ankles and meowed like he'd been starving for a week, which was a lie, because she'd fed him before her shift, and his bowl still had food in it. She sat down on the floor in the middle of the kitchen, which was also the living room, which was also the bedroom, because the apartment had one room and a bathroom that had a toilet but not a sink. She sat down on the linoleum with her wet coat still on, and she put her hand on Biscuit's back, and she cried for exactly 90 seconds. Then she stopped. She wiped her face with the back of her wrist. She got up. She put the card on the nightstand, next to the lamp that didn't work. She fed Biscuit. She changed out of her uniform. She put the uniform in a pile by the door to wash at the laundromat tomorrow if she had quarters, which she didn't. But she was thinking about tomorrow, like tomorrow was going to be a normal day, and she needed the pretense of normalcy like she needed the air to breathe. She lay down on the mattress on the floor. She'd never had a bed frame and had given up wanting one around 21, and she pulled the quilt her mother had made up to her chin, and she stared at the ceiling. Biscuit jumped up and settled on her chest. 14 pounds of orange cat, purring like a small engine. He was diagnosed with chronic kidney disease at his last vet appointment, which you took him to 11 months ago. She stroked Biscuit's head. He pressed the top of his skull into her palm. You would have to make a decision you're not ready to make. She had been pretending. For months. She had been pretending that as long as she didn't take him back to the vet, no one would ever tell her what came next. And as long as no one told her what came next, she wouldn't have to be the person who couldn't afford it. She had been pretending about a lot of things. About her mother's bill, about her rent, about Marco, about the coat she was going to need before the temperature dropped below 30, about the filling in her back molar that she'd been ignoring for 2 years because the last time she'd looked up what a root canal cost without insurance, she'd closed the tab and gone to bed. She had been pretending that tomorrow would come and she would figure it out. Tomorrow had been coming for a long time. Biscuit, she whispered into the dark, into the orange fur under her chin, into the rain against the window. Biscuit, I don't know. The cat purred. He didn't care. He had never cared about anything in his life except food and her, in that order. She thought about the card on the nightstand. She thought about Adrian Vale's eyes. She thought about his hands. She hadn't noticed them at the time, but now that she was thinking about it, she realized she'd noticed them without noticing. He'd been wearing no rings. His nails had been short and clean. There had been a small scar on the back of his right hand, between the thumb and the index finger, white and raised, the shape of a crescent. Old. Maybe from childhood, maybe not. A man who gets what he asks for. She thought about what it would feel like to not be cold next month, to not count change at the bus stop, To take Biscuit to the vet and say do whatever he needs and not flinch when they told her the number. She thought about what her mother would say. Her mother would say, run. Her mother would say, baby, you don't know what that kind of money costs. Nobody just hands you that kind of money. There's always a price, and the price is always the one thing you can't afford to lose. Her mother had also said once, near the end, when the morphine had been making her foggy but honest, Lena, I'm sorry. I'm sorry I couldn't give you anything. I'm sorry you're going to have to make choices I never had to, because I never had anything to choose with. Lena had said, you gave me everything, Mom, and her mother had closed her eyes and said, no, I didn't. But thank you for saying it. She stared at the ceiling. The rain was slowing. She could hear the drip from the vent above the stove that the landlord had never fixed. You would have to make a decision you're not ready to make. She turned her head. She looked at the card on the nightstand. White, thick, black numbers. A little wet at the corner. Her hand came out from under the quilt. Biscuit grumbled at the movement but didn't get up. She picked up the card. She held it in front of her face, in the dark. And she couldn't really read it anymore, but she could feel the weight of it, which was heavier than a card had any right to be. She thought, I could say no. She thought, I could throw it away. She thought, I could go to work tomorrow, and Marco could fire me or not fire me, and I could find another job or not find another job, and in 6 months, I could still be right here, and in 6 years, I could still be right here, and in 60 years, I could still be right here, and Biscuit will be long dead, and my mother's bill will still not be paid, and I will never have been anything to anyone but a pair of hands. She closed her eyes. She thought, he knew about Captain, and somewhere under that thought, quieter, more dangerous. I liked that someone knew. She lay in the dark with the card in her hand and the cat on her chest and the rain on the window, and she didn't sleep, but she didn't move either, and somewhere around 4 in the morning the rain stopped entirely, and the silence that came after was so complete that she could hear her own heartbeat, steady and unconcerned, doing the only job it knew how to do. When the first gray light came through the window, she sat up, slowly, so she wouldn't disturb Biscuit. She set the cat down on the warm spot she'd left on the mattress. She walked barefoot across the cold linoleum to the kitchenette. She poured a glass of water from the tap, which ran brown for the first 3 seconds, and then cleared. She drank the water. She picked up her phone off the counter. 11% battery. She plugged it in. She looked at the card in her other hand. She dialed the number. It rang once. A man's voice answered. Not Adrian's. Younger, polite, professional in a way that made her think of valets and concierges and men who opened doors for a living without ever looking at the faces of the people going through. Yes, Miss Cross. She hadn't said her name. She swallowed. I'm calling about... Yes, Miss Cross. A car will be at your building in 40 minutes. You may bring whatever you wish. Nothing is required. Mr. Vale asked me to tell you that you may change your mind at any point up until you reach the house, and the driver has instructions to return you to your apartment without comment or consequence if you ask him to. She closed her eyes. Okay, she said. Is there anything else, Miss Cross? She looked across the room at Biscuit, who was watching her from the mattress with the wise, judgmental expression cats reserve for people making mistakes. My cat, she said. Yes. I have a cat. I'm not going without him. There was the smallest pause on the other end of the line. Not a hesitation, something more like a note being taken. Of course, Miss Cross. The driver will have a carrier. The line clicked. She stood in the middle of her one-room apartment in the gray early morning, barefoot on cold linoleum, holding a dead phone in one hand and a white card in the other, and she realized she was smiling, and she realized she didn't know why, and she realized she didn't have time to figure it out. She had 40 minutes. She started to pack. 40 minutes, it turned out, was not very long at all. Lena stood in the middle of her apartment with Biscuit's carrier open on the mattress and tried to decide what a person brought with them when they were leaving their entire life behind. Not leaving it, she kept correcting herself. 6 months. Pausing it. Walking away from it for 6 months with the option to walk back. But her hands didn't believe her hands. Her hands were moving like this was final. She took the photograph of her mother off the windowsill. The one from the picnic at Lincoln Park, before the diagnosis, when her mother's hair had still been black, and she'd still been laughing with her whole face. She wrapped it in one of the 2 clean t-shirts she owned and put it in the bottom of the canvas duffel bag she'd bought at a thrift store when she was 19 and still telling herself she was going to travel someday. She took her mother's quilt off the mattress. She folded it carefully, the way her mother had taught her, corner to corner, smoothing as she went. It took up almost the entire bag. She took the jewelry box, not the one with Captain in it, that was buried in a yard she hadn't been back to in 15 years. The other one. The little wooden one on the shelf above the hot plate. Inside it were her mother's wedding ring, which her mother had kept even after Lena's father left, because her mother had said the ring didn't do anything wrong, a pair of silver earrings that Lena had never worn, and a folded piece of notebook paper with a list of 9 names on it in her mother's handwriting. Lena didn't know what the list was. She had never asked. Her mother had handed it to her 2 days before she died and said, "Put this somewhere safe," and Lena had. She took a change of clothes, jeans, a flannel shirt, underwear, socks. She didn't take her uniform. She took Biscuit's food dish and the half-empty bag of generic kibble, even though she had a strong feeling, that neither of those things would be necessary where she was going. She took her toothbrush. She looked around the apartment. 10 minutes had passed. It had taken her 10 minutes to pack her entire life. The rest of it was furniture that wasn't hers. Dishes she'd bought 3 for $1 at an estate sale, and books she'd gotten from the free card outside the library. If she didn't come back, none of it mattered. If she did come back, it would all still be here, because no one had ever wanted any of it in the first place. She sat down on the mattress next to the open carrier. Biscuit was watching her from on top of the radiator, tail flicking in slow, suspicious arcs. He knew. Cats always knew. "Hey, buddy," she said. "We're going somewhere." Biscuit narrowed his eyes. "It's gonna be fine." The tail flicked faster. "Okay, I don't know if it's going to be fine, but it's going to be different. Different could be fine. Different could be..." She stopped because she was arguing with a cat, and because the cat was winning. She picked him up. He let her, the way he always did, with the full-body droop of a creature who had decided long ago that resistance was undignified. She set him in the carrier and closed the door before he could think better of it. He let out one low, offended yowl and then went silent, which was worse. Her phone buzzed. Car downstairs. No signature, no number. Just those 2 words on the screen. She looked around the apartment one more time. The window above the laundromat. The hot plate with the burn mark in the shape of Florida. The water stain on the ceiling that looked like a rabbit if you tilted your head. The corner where Biscuit had thrown up on the first night she'd brought him home, and which still smelled faintly like cat if the heat kicked on too high. She turned off the light. She locked the door behind her. She put the key in the little ceramic dish on the shelf outside her door, where she always left it when she was running late, because Mrs. Ochoa from 2B fed Biscuit sometimes, and Mrs. Ochoa never remembered to bring her own key back. She wrote a note on the back of an envelope from the power company. "Mrs. O, gone for a while. Biscuit is coming with me? I'll call. L." And tucked it under the dish. She carried the duffel bag in one hand and the cat carrier in the other, and she went down the stairs of death for what might have been the last time. The car at the curb was not what she'd expected. She had been picturing, without meaning to picture it, the kind of black stretch limousine she'd seen in movies, the kind with tinted windows and a little flag on the hood. What was actually waiting for her was a dark gray sedan. Expensive, she could tell from the way the light moved on the paint, but not showy. A car for a man who didn't want to be looked at. The driver was standing on the curb under an umbrella. He was maybe 60, maybe older, with a short beard gone entirely white and a face that had seen a lot of weather. He nodded when he saw her. "Miss Cross, my name is Thomas. May I take your bag?" "I've got it." "Of course." He held the umbrella over her while she settled Biscuit's carrier in the back seat. The interior of the car smelled like cedar and something faintly warm, like an old library. There was a blanket folded on the seat next to where she sat down. There was a travel mug of coffee in the cup holder. Black. Still steaming. "Mr. Vale wasn't sure how you took it," Thomas said. "There's sugar and cream in the center console if you'd like." "I take it black." "Very good." She picked up the mug. The warmth of it hit her palms, and she hadn't realized until that second how cold her hands had been, how cold they had been for days, maybe for weeks. She didn't drink. She just held it. Thomas closed her door. He walked around to the driver's side. He pulled away from the curb so smoothly that Biscuit, in his carrier, didn't make a sound. She watched her building get smaller in the side mirror. "How far is it?" she asked. "About 40 minutes, miss." "Is he going to be there?" "Yes, miss." "What's he like?" Thomas's eyes moved to the rearview mirror. They met hers. They were kind eyes, she realized, not soft. Nothing about Thomas was soft, but kind, in the way of men who had made peace with a lot of things. "Mr. Vale is particular," he said. "He is also consistent. You may find the first difficult. You will find the second a gift in time." That wasn't really an answer. "No, miss, it wasn't." She almost laughed. She sipped the coffee instead. It was very good, which didn't surprise her. The city went by outside the window. Gray morning, wet streets, the last of the night shift workers walking home with their collars up, a man sleeping in the doorway of a shuttered bodega, a woman pushing a grocery cart full of cans down the middle of the sidewalk. Lena watched them the way a person watches a country they are leaving. She had been all of them. Some nights she had been all three in the same shift. They crossed the river and the buildings changed. They got taller, then shorter again, then set back from the street behind iron gates and long driveways and trees that had been planted 40 years ago by people who'd paid to know what a tree would look like in 40 years. The houses out here didn't have numbers on them. They had names on little brass plaques. She couldn't read most of them from the road, but she saw one as they passed, the Laurels, and she thought, who names a house? And then she thought, I guess people who own houses this big name them, because you can't just call it the house when you have more than one. Thomas slowed. He turned onto a gravel drive between two stone pillars. There was no name on the pillars. There was no plaque. There was only a small, discreet camera mounted on the left pillar, and as they passed it, the camera moved, tracking them. The gravel drive wound through trees for what she estimated was half a mile. Then the trees opened, and she saw the house. It was not what she had pictured. She had been picturing something Gatsby, something white and columned and obvious. What she saw instead was long and low and made of a dark gray stone that looked like it had been pulled out of a mountain nearby. The roof was slate. The windows were tall and narrow and deep set. It looked less like a house and more like a thing the land had decided to grow. It was beautiful, but it wasn't friendly. It wasn't trying to be. The main entrance is through the courtyard, Thomas said, and pulled around to the side. Adrian Vale was standing on the stone steps when the car stopped. He was dressed differently than he had been the night before. No coat, a dark sweater, soft-looking, over a collared shirt, trousers, boots. He looked younger in daylight. He looked like a man who might, in another life, have been a graduate student or a violinist or a person who ran a vineyard. His hair was still damp. He'd been awake long enough to have showered, but not long enough for his hair to dry. He had a coffee mug in his hand, and as Thomas opened the car door for her, he drank from it once, unhurried, and watched her over the rim. Lena got out. Her legs were not entirely steady. She had been sitting in a warm car for 40 minutes without eating, and the adrenaline that had carried her down the stairs of her building was starting to ebb, and she was suddenly aware that she had not slept, that her hair was barely combed, that she was wearing her thrift store coat and her mother's old sneakers in front of a house with a camera on the pillar. "You came," Adrian said. "I came." "Thomas, the bag." "I've got it," Lena said. "Let him." Thomas had already taken the duffel out of the trunk. He was waiting. "It's just one bag," Lena said. "I can carry a bag." Adrian looked at her for a beat, then he set down his coffee on the stone wall next to him. "Okay," he said. He came down the steps. Before she understood what was happening, he had taken Biscuit's carrier out of her hand. Not roughly. He had just taken it, the way you might take a grocery bag from a friend whose hands were full, and he was already turning back toward the house with it. "What are you doing?" "Carrying the cat." "You don't have to." "I know." He was walking up the steps. Biscuit, inside the carrier, was making a noise Lena had never heard him make before. A kind of low chirrup that she was pretty sure, in cat, meant this man has taken me and I am evaluating him. She followed because she didn't know what else to do. Thomas followed with the bag. The front door opened without Adrian touching it. A woman was there, maybe 50, maybe 60, with silver hair pulled back in a tight knot and a face that did not change when she saw Lena, which Lena took somehow as a kindness. Miss Cross, welcome, the woman said. I'm Margaret. I run the house. Anything you need, you ask me. Hi. The cat will need a litter box, food, a bed, and a vet appointment scheduled for this week. Is there anything else? He's on kidney. Prescription food. Yes, we'll speak to the vet. Mr. Vale mentioned. Lena looked at Adrian. He was setting the carrier down in the hallway. He opened the door. Biscuit stepped out slowly and stood blinking in the light off the marble floor. The cat looked at the floor. He looked at Adrian. He looked at Lena. Then, with the utter confidence of a creature who had never once doubted his right to any piece of furniture in any house, Biscuit walked across the marble, past Adrian's legs, and into what turned out to be a sitting room, where he hopped onto a gray velvet armchair and began to wash his face. Well, Margaret said, he's decided. Adrian, without turning around, said, that chair was 200 years old. Was? Lena said. Was. It's his now. She didn't know if he was joking. His face hadn't moved. She looked at the chair. 200 years. Biscuit was, by her math, somewhere between 12 and 14, and he weighed 14 pounds, and he shed like it was a full-time job. She opened her mouth to apologize. She closed it. Okay, she said. Adrian looked at her then, the gray eyes, the same attention as last night, but with something new at the edges of it, something that might have been amusement or might have been nothing. Come eat, he said. She hadn't realized until that moment how hungry she was. The kitchen of the house was nothing like the kitchen at the Meridian. It had a long wooden table that had been a tree once, she could tell, and the tree had lived for a long time. There were copper pots hanging on a rack above the stove. There was a tall window over the sink that looked out onto a stretch of wet grass sloping down toward a line of dark trees. There was a second woman at the stove, younger, in an apron, who looked up when Lena walked in and gave her a tiny professional smile. This is Inez, Margaret said. She cooks. Hi, Inez. Miss Cross, Inez said. She went back to whatever she was doing, which was something with eggs. Sit, Adrian said. Lena sat. The wooden chair creaked under her. She put her hands in her lap and looked at them and realized that her knuckles were still split and that she hadn't thought when she'd been packing to bring the tube of hand cream she had been hoarding for 3 months because it was the good kind. Adrian sat across from her. Not at the head of the table. Across. He pushed the sugar bowl toward her without looking, because the coffee that had appeared in front of her was not the same coffee she'd had in the car, and this one had no cream in it. I don't want sugar, she said. All right. I just drink it black. That's fine. I wasn't complaining. I didn't think you were. Inez set a plate in front of her. Eggs. Something with tomatoes. A piece of bread that had been grilled with olive oil and something green. The smell of it almost undid her. She had forgotten what hot food smelled like that wasn't made in a hotel kitchen. Not just the food, the quiet around it. The absence of Marco's voice, the absence of fluorescent light. She picked up the fork. Her hand was shaking again. She set the fork down. Eat, Adrian said quietly. I'm going to. Eat slowly. I'm going to. She picked up the fork again. She ate. She didn't speak for a while. He didn't either. Inez moved around the kitchen at the edges of Lena's vision, doing small, precise things with a knife and a bowl. Margaret had disappeared somewhere. Lena had not heard her leave, but she was gone. Biscuit was presumably still on the 200-year-old chair. When Lena had eaten most of the plate, she set the fork down. She looked up. Adrian was watching her the way he had watched her last night, not staring, not rude, paying attention. She had the sense that he paid attention to everything in the same way, and that this was the reason other people found him frightening. Okay, she said. Ground rules. All right. I need to know what you want from me. I told you what I want from you. You told me a version of it. He tilted his head. A concession. I want you with me, he said, publicly, in specific rooms for the next 6 months. At the end of those 6 months, if you wish to leave, you leave, and I owe you nothing. If you wish to stay, in any capacity, we talk about it then. But you will not be asked to stay. You will not be encouraged to stay. The exit is built into the deal. It's the part that makes it a deal instead of a trap. What specific rooms? Dinners, receptions, 2 weddings, a funeral potentially, 3 weekend events at other houses, 1 trip out of the country, probably Italy, possibly France, I don't know yet. Italy? Yes. I don't have a passport. You will by Thursday. She looked at him. Thursday? She said. Yes. That's 4 days. It is. How does somebody get a passport in 4 days? Money. He said it without bragging. He said it the way a mechanic says wrench. It was the tool you used for that problem. She let out a breath she hadn't known she was holding. What do I wear to these things? Whatever you're given. You'll be working with a woman named Celeste starting tomorrow. She'll dress you. You will not like her. She's not paid to be liked. She's paid to make sure that when you walk into a room, no one in the room has grounds to dismiss you based on what you're wearing. That is the only thing she's for. What about how I talk, how I eat, how I hold a glass? You don't need to worry about any of that. I don't know which fork to use. Neither does anyone you'll be sitting next to. They pretend they do. They were taught to pretend. That's all it is. You sound like you don't like them. I don't. Then why do you spend time with them? Adrian picked up his coffee. He drank from it. He set it down. The scar on the back of his hand caught the light. Because I have work to do, he said, and the work is in the rooms they're in. She waited. She thought he might say more. He didn't. Okay, she said. What do I call you? Adrian. In public. Adrian. In front of them, I call you Lena. I don't use terms of endearment, and I don't expect them from you. We are, for the purposes of the world we'll be in, 2 adults who have chosen to be in each other's company. That is sufficient. We don't need to perform more than that. Performing more than that is how people get caught. Caught at what? He looked at her. Lying, he said. Are we lying? We are presenting. It's not the same thing. But I want you to understand the difference because the people we'll be around are very good at feeling a lie, and they feel one the way an animal feels a storm. If you try to perform for them, they'll smell it. If you simply exist next to me, they won't be able to touch you. That is all I need from you. Exist next to me and say as little as possible for the first month. The first month. You'll learn. You'll know what to say. But for the first month, I want you to listen more than talk. Smile, nod. Drink whatever you're handed, slowly. Eat what you want. Don't finish anything. Don't apologize for anything. If you are spoken to and you don't know how to answer, look at me. I'll answer for you. That sounds... I don't want to be your... You won't be. You will look to them like a woman who has nothing to prove. That is a very specific kind of power, and most of them have never had it in their lives. It will unnerve them. It will unnerve them in a way that is useful to me. But it only works if you don't try. The minute you try, you lose it. Why is it useful to you? Because they are people who read other people for weakness, he said. It's what they were raised to do. If they cannot find yours, they will assume you don't have one. And if they assume you don't have one, they will be careful with me in ways they are not otherwise careful. So I'm armor. He didn't answer right away. You are, he said, finally, a presence. I am not going to pretend the presence doesn't serve me. I told you last night, I get what I ask for. I am asking for your presence for 6 months in exchange for your life, which is what I am offering in exchange. That is the deal. I'm not asking you to love me. I'm not asking you to want me. I'm not asking you to lie down with me. I'm asking you to be in the room. She looked at him. She looked for a long moment. She was trying to see something, and she wasn't sure what. A crack. A tell. Some indication that this was going to turn, the way every good thing that had ever been handed to her had eventually turned. She didn't find it. But the absence of it wasn't comforting because she didn't believe she was good enough at looking. What's the catch? She said. There are several. Tell me them. He set his cup down. 1, he said, you will meet people who are dangerous. I will not be able to tell you which ones because the ones I can identify easily are not the ones I worry about. You will need to trust me to stand between you and them. You will need to do what I tell you in those rooms without negotiating it in the moment. Later, in private, you can ask me anything. In the moment, you do what I tell you. Okay? 2, You will not have your phone on you at public events. You will have a different phone, one I give you, which I will also be able to see. This is not because I want to read your messages. It's because the kind of people will be around use phones to tell them things about strangers, and I am not going to hand them a map of you. Okay? 3. You may not tell anyone. Not anyone. Not your closest friend. Not a priest. Not a therapist. Not a diary. What I am about to become to you, and what I already am to the world. Inside the house, between us, you can ask anything. Outside the house, you are the woman I am seen with, and that is all. If you break this, I don't punish you. I simply end the arrangement. You keep what I've paid through that point. You keep the debt clearance. You go home. But we are done. Okay. 4. He paused. 4 is the hardest, he said. 4 is that I am not a good man by most definitions most people would use. I don't say that to be dramatic. I say that so you are not surprised later. I have done things. I will do things. You will, over the course of the next 6 months, become aware of some of the things I do. When you become aware, you will have a choice, which is the same choice you had last night and the same choice you have this morning. You can leave. You can stay. Nothing else about this changes. I will not ask you to help me do anything you are not willing to do. I will not ask you to lie to a police officer on my behalf. I will not ask you to hurt anyone. But I will ask you sometimes to be in a room where you don't want to be and to look like you want to be there. And on nights when you don't know what I've been doing, I will ask you not to ask. She was very still. So I'm supposed to not ask. About specific things, on specific nights, not always, not about everything. And if I ask, I'll tell you. And then you'll know. And then you'll have to decide what to do with what you know. She thought about it. Are you a criminal? He considered the word. He considered it the way a man considers a piece of fruit, deciding whether it's ripe. In the legal sense of the word, he said, most of what I do is not illegal. Some of it is. Which some of it? I'm not going to answer that at 9 in the morning at this table to a woman I brought into my house 11 hours after meeting her. Fair. I'm being more honest with you than I was with the first 3. Why? He didn't answer right away. Because you asked, he said, and because I don't want to find out 6 weeks from now that I've been lying to you by omission and that you've noticed. That would go badly. For both of us. She took a breath. She let it out. I want to see Biscuit, she said. Okay. I want to see where I'm going to sleep. Okay. I want a day. Before all of this, the woman, the passport, the dress. I want a day in this house just to sit. You have a day. Just one day. You have as many as you need up to a week. We don't need to be anywhere until the 21st. What's the 21st? A dinner. Whose dinner? A man named Whitmore. We'll talk about him later. She nodded. She looked at her hands. She looked at the nearly empty plate. She looked at the window, where the grass was gray-green and the trees at the bottom of the lawn were bending in a wind she couldn't hear through the glass. Adrian. It was the first time she'd said his name. She hadn't planned to. It came out quieter than she'd meant. He looked up. Yes. The woman before me. The third one. Yes. Is she all right? A flicker at the back of his eyes. Something she couldn't read. Not pain, not anger. Something older. Something that had already been put away a long time ago. She is, he said. She lives in Portland. She runs a bookstore. She's married. She had a daughter last spring. Does she ever talk to you? No. Does she hate you? I don't know. I think she doesn't think about me, which is better than hate. Is that what you want at the end? For me to not think about you? He looked at her across the table. Something in his face was different briefly than anything she had seen on it so far. It was there, and then it was gone. I want, he said, at the end, for you to be in a position where you can choose whether to think about me. That's the whole point. Margaret came back into the kitchen then, quiet as a cat, and she said, Miss Cross, your room is ready, if you'd like to see it. Yes, Lena said, please. She stood up. Her legs were still not entirely steady. Adrian stayed seated. He didn't stand up when she did. which she noticed and which she appreciated without quite knowing why, he wasn't performing politeness. He was treating her like a person who was going to get up and come back, not like a guest who had to be escorted through her own morning. She followed Margaret out of the kitchen. In the sitting room, in passing, she glanced at the gray velvet armchair. Biscuit was asleep on it, all 14 pounds of him, upside down, with his white belly exposed and his paws in the air, as if to say, "This is mine now, and I dare anyone to argue." Margaret saw her look. "He's fine, miss." "I know, he does this." He chose well. The room they had put her in was at the back of the house, on the second floor, at the end of a hallway that was longer than her entire apartment. Margaret opened the door and stepped aside. Lena walked in, and then she stopped. The room was, she didn't have a word for it. It was bigger than every bedroom she had ever slept in put together. The bed was a four-poster, but the posts were plain dark wood, no canopy, nothing frilly. The sheets had been turned down. A small dark blue armchair sat by the window. The window looked out on the same lawn she'd seen from the kitchen, but from up here she could see past the tree line, past the lawn, out to where a small lake lay flat and gray under the morning clouds. A lake. He had a lake. There was a door off to the left that she assumed led to a bathroom. There was a fire laid but not lit in a small fireplace across from the bed. There was a little writing desk by the window with nothing on it except a notebook, plain black, unopened, and a pen. On the bed was her duffel bag. It had been placed there carefully, not dropped. Her coat was hanging on the back of the door, which someone, Thomas, she assumed, must have done while she was eating. Everything in the room smelled faintly of lavender and cedar. Not heavy, just enough that the air was doing something. "The bathroom is through that door," Margaret said. "Your towels are the gray ones. There's a robe on the back of the door. If you need anything at all, you pick up the phone next to the bed and dial 1. Dial 2 for the kitchen, 3 for the garage. 4 is Mr. Vale, but he's asked me to tell you not to worry about disturbing him. He means it." "Okay." "The vet will come on Wednesday to see your cat. Inez will be making a tray for you at noon if you'd like to sleep between now and then. She said to say that you look tired." Lena's eyes stung. "Thank you, Margaret." "Of course, miss. Can you call me Lena?" Margaret considered this. Her face didn't change exactly, but something in it softened by about half a degree. "I can call you Lena when it's you and me in a room," she said. "In front of others, including Inez, including Thomas, I'll call you Miss Cross. That's how I run the house. It keeps things clean for everyone." "Okay. Get some rest, Lena." The door closed softly behind her. Lena stood in the middle of the room for a long moment. She didn't know what to do with her hands. She didn't know what to do with her body. She felt suddenly like a woman who had walked onto a stage in the middle of a play and did not know her lines. She walked slowly to the window. She put her palm flat against the glass. It was cold. Outside, the wind was moving in the tops of the trees. She could see a bird, a crow, maybe, lifting off a branch and falling across the sky. She thought, "I am in a house that has a lake." She thought, "My cat is asleep on a 200-year-old chair." She thought, 12 hours ago I was scrubbing a grill." She thought, "And this was the one that sat on her chest. He told me he isn't a good man." She turned away from the window. She walked to the bed. She sat down on the edge of it, and the mattress was so soft under her that she had the absurd, humiliating urge to cry. She didn't. She breathed through it. She took off her mother's old sneakers. She set them carefully side by side at the foot of the bed. She lay down on top of the covers, still in her jeans, still in her flannel shirt. She pulled one corner of the heavy, clean-smelling blanket over her legs. She thought she wouldn't sleep. She thought she would lie there and stare at the ceiling and wait for noon, for whatever came next, for the next instruction, the next introduction, the next impossible new room. She was asleep in 90 seconds. She woke up almost 4 hours later, and for the first blurred second she didn't know where she was. The light in the room had changed. The clouds had broken a little, and there was a long pale stripe of sun lying across the foot of the bed, across her feet, across the blanket she'd pulled over herself in her sleep. Someone had lit the fire in the fireplace. Someone had set a small tray on the writing desk, a bowl with a lid on it, a glass of water, a piece of fruit, a cloth napkin. Someone had done all of this without waking her, which meant someone had been in the room with her while she slept, and this should have frightened her, but somehow it didn't. She sat up slowly. She rubbed her face. Biscuit was on the bed. He was on the blanket, across her ankles, a warm orange weight, kneading the fabric with his claws in a way he had not done since he was a kitten. He looked up at her when she stirred. He yawned. He put his head back down. Someone had brought him up too. Lena put her hand on his back. She could feel his ribs under the fur. She could feel his purr. "Okay, buddy," she said very quietly. "Okay." She stayed there like that for a long time. The fire crackled in the grate. The sun moved across the floor. Down on the lawn, a long way off, she could see a figure walking along the tree line. Too far to see clearly, but she knew it was Adrian by the shape of his shoulders, by the way he walked like the ground had been put there for him. He was alone. He had his hands in his pockets. He stopped once and looked out toward the lake and stood there for a minute without moving. Then he kept walking. Lena watched him until he disappeared into the trees. She didn't know what she was watching. She didn't know what kind of man walked in his own woods in the middle of a Tuesday morning with his hands in his pockets, or what he was thinking about, or whether out there under those trees he was a different man than the one she had just had breakfast with. She didn't know if she'd ever find out. She didn't know. And this was the thing that unsettled her most. Why she had the clear, small, unwelcome feeling that she wanted to. She got up. She went to the desk. She lifted the lid off the bowl. It was soup, something with chicken and something green and a slice of lemon floating on top. It was still warm. She sat in the small armchair by the window and she ate, slowly, with Biscuit on the carpet at her feet, and she looked out at the lawn where a man she did not know was walking through his own trees, and she understood, for the first time clearly, what she had agreed to. She had not agreed to be his companion. Not really. She had agreed to be a witness. For 6 months, she was going to watch a man up close who did not let people watch him. For 6 months, she was going to know things nobody was supposed to know. For 6 months, she was going to sit across from him at tables like this one and learn slowly, day by day, what kind of creature he actually was. And then she was going to have to decide whether she could walk away from that, with all that money and all that knowledge in her head, and go back to a one-room apartment above a laundromat and pretend she had never seen the inside of this house. She set the spoon down. Biscuit looked up at her. "I don't know, buddy," she said. The cat blinked at her, slow, like he was saving his opinion for later. Outside, the wind moved through the trees. Somewhere in the house, a door closed, soft and far away, and Lena heard footsteps on a staircase she couldn't see, and she knew, without knowing how she knew, that Adrian had come back inside. She sat very still in the armchair with her hands around the warm bowl, and she listened. The footsteps paused on the landing. They did not come toward her hallway. They went the other way, down some other corridor, into some other part of the house she hadn't seen yet and might never see. A second door closed. Then the house was quiet again. She let out a breath. She hadn't known she was holding one. She finished the soup. She set the bowl back on the tray. She went to the bathroom, which was, of course, enormous, with a tub she could have slept in and towels so thick she wasn't sure they were towels. And she washed her face with hot water for the first time and she couldn't remember how long. She looked at herself in the mirror. Her hair was a disaster. Her eyes were tired. There was a small red line on her cheek from the pillow. She looked, she thought, like a woman who had not yet decided what to do with her face. She went back to the bedroom. She sat on the edge of the bed. She opened the black notebook on the desk because she was curious whether it was a notebook or a decoration, and she found that it was blank. Every page white, every page clean. The pen beside it was heavy and cold in her hand. She thought for a long moment. Then she wrote in small, careful letters on the first page. Day 1. I'm here. Biscuit is on a 200-year-old chair. He says no. She closed the notebook. She put the pen down. She looked out the window, at the lawn, at the trees, at the line of the lake beyond them, flat and gray and patient. Somewhere out there, out past the trees, past the gravel road, past the stone pillars with the camera on them, her old city was still going on without her. Marco was probably yelling at somebody. The 34 bus was probably running late. The woman on the bench at the shelter was probably still there, still under her green wool blanket. Lena pressed her palm against the glass. The glass was cold. She stayed there for a while. Celeste arrived on Tuesday morning at exactly 9 o'clock, and she hated Lena on sight. Lena had been told, the night before, that the fitting would happen in the East Sunroom, which was a room she had not yet been in. Margaret walked her there without comment. Down the long hallway past the library, past a closed door Lena assumed was Adrian's study, past a grand piano no one seemed to play, and into a bright glassed-in room at the corner of the house where the morning light came in from two sides at once and turned everything a pale, clean gold. There were 3 racks of clothing in the room. There was a mirror the size of a small car. There was a low padded platform in the middle of the floor that Lena recognized, vaguely, from department store dressing rooms she'd been afraid to walk into as a teenager. There was a woman standing next to the platform with her hands clasped in front of her, very still, watching Lena the way a surgeon watches a tumor on a scan. "Miss Cross," the woman said, "I'm Celeste. Please take off everything except your underwear." Lena stopped in the doorway. "Good morning," she said. "Good morning. Please take off everything except your underwear." Is there somewhere to change?" "No, I need to see you in daylight, not in the dressing room. Daylight is what matters. The dressing room is a lie men invented to sell women clothes that don't fit them." Celeste was perhaps 45. She was sharp-boned and expensively dressed in a way that made Lena's flannel shirt feel like a joke the universe had told at her expense. Her hair was silver blonde, cut close to her head, and she had not smiled once since Lena walked in, and Lena had the distinct sense that she was not going to smile today, or tomorrow, or ever. Lena stood there in the doorway. Margaret, behind her, said quietly, "I'll leave you, Lena," and was gone before Lena could ask her to stay. "I don't," Lena started. "You don't want to take off your clothes in front of a stranger," Celeste said. "Yes, I understand. Every woman before you also didn't want to take off her clothes in front of me. It is the price of the next 4 hours. If I cannot see you, I cannot dress you. If I cannot dress you, you walk into Whitmore's dinner in 9 days looking like someone who wandered off the street, and Mr. Vale will be embarrassed, and I will be embarrassed, and you will be eaten alive. So, please." Lena looked at the mirror. She could see her own face in it from across the room. She looked pale. She looked small. She was aware suddenly of every pound she had lost in the last 2 years, of the way her collarbones stuck out at the top of the flannel, of the fact that her bra was the same bra she had owned since she was 21. She thought, "I could go back upstairs." She thought, "I could tell Adrian that I've changed my mind." She thought then about the hospital bill. She unbuttoned the flannel shirt. She didn't look at Celeste while she did it. She looked at a point on the far wall, a little watercolor of a bird on a branch, and she kept her eyes there. She slid the shirt off her shoulders. She folded it, badly, but she folded it, and set it on a chair. She unbuttoned her jeans. She stepped out of them. She folded those too. She stood in her underwear on the pale wood floor, and she was cold, and she was not going to say she was cold, because saying she was cold would be giving Celeste a weakness to note. Celeste walked a slow circle around her. The woman did not touch her. She made small sounds at the back of her throat that Lena had never heard a person make before. She stopped once behind Lena's left shoulder and breathed out through her nose. She stopped once in front of Lena's hip and tilted her head. When she came back around to the front, she folded her arms across her chest and looked Lena in the face, directly, for the first time. "You're thin," she said, "because you have been hungry for a long time, not because you wanted to be. This is visible. It cannot be hidden. We will not try to hide it. Thinness from choice is one thing. Thinness from survival is another. Men like Whitmore know the difference, and they will use it. We are going to dress you, instead, like a woman who does not apologize for her bones." "Okay," Lena said, because she didn't know what else to say. "Your hair. What about it?" "It is the color it was born. This is good. We will not change it. We will cut it on Thursday. 3 inches. The length you have now is the length of a woman who forgets to get her hair cut. We want the length of a woman who has decided not to." "Okay." "Your hands are a problem." Lena looked down at her hands. The knuckles had scabbed but not healed. The burn scar on her wrist was, in this light, more visible than she had ever let herself see it before. "I can," she started. "You can nothing. Lotion will help. Gloves at night. In 10 days they will look better. They will never look like the hands of a woman who has not worked. And this is fine. This is, in fact, useful. The women in the rooms you are about to enter have hands like soft little animals that have never seen a dish. Yours will tell a different story. You will not hide them. You will not wear rings that draw the eye to them. but you will not hide them. Okay. Stop saying okay. Stop agreeing to everything. It is irritating. Sorry. Stop apologizing too. Sorry, Lena said again, and then closed her mouth, and Celeste made a small sound that was almost nearly a laugh. Better, Celeste said. There is a person under there. Good. I was worried for a minute. She went to the first rack. She pulled a hanger off it. The dress she held up was dark green, almost black, with a quiet shape that did not announce itself but did not need to. She held it out to Lena. Put this on, slowly. The zipper is small. It breaks if you hurry. Lena took the dress. The fabric was heavier than she had expected and cooler, and it moved under her hand like water. She stepped into it. She pulled it up over her hips. She slid her arms into the sleeves, which were long and narrow. She reached back for the zipper, and Celeste was already there doing it, her fingers quick and impersonal at the top of Lena's spine. Step up, Celeste said. Lena stepped onto the padded platform. She looked up. She looked at herself in the mirror. For a moment, she did not recognize the woman standing there. It was as if someone had taken Lena's body. Her narrow shoulders, her tired eyes, her collarbones, her ragged bun of hair, and put a better woman's dress on it, and the dress had done something Lena had not known a dress could do. It had not disguised her. It had not lied about her. It had simply given her a silhouette, a shape that said this woman exists here on purpose, and the effect was so disorienting that Lena put a hand out to steady herself, and there was no railing to grab. Don't fall off the box, Celeste said behind her. It's embarrassing for everyone when they fall off the box. I'm not going to... Look at yourself. I am. Look harder. Lena looked. The dress ended at her mid-calf. The neckline did not plunge. Nothing about it was suggestive. It was simply exact. The fabric found her waist, and the fabric left her waist, and the fabric ended at her collarbone, the way a sentence ends at a period. There was nothing extra. There was nothing missing. This is the first of 8, Celeste said. You will wear each one once, in this order, to the first 8 events. After that, we will have learned enough about which ones work on which rooms. After that, it gets easier. For now, we trust the order. Whitmore first. Whitmore is a peacock. The green swallows his peacock. This is on purpose. Who is Whitmore? Ask Mr. Vale. I dress you. I do not educate you. That is for him. Okay? Stop saying okay. Celeste held up a hand. Lena swallowed the rest of the word. The morning went on like that for 3 hours. Dress after dress. A coat, then another coat. Shoes. More shoes. A pair of earrings that were so small they looked like nothing, and that Celeste swore, without smiling, cost more than a used car. Celeste did not touch her more than she had to, and when she had to, her hands were cool and precise. She did not ever ask Lena if she was comfortable. She asked instead whether Lena could lift her arms, whether the fabric bit at her waist, whether the shoes hurt at the little bone on the side of her foot. Questions like a mechanic's questions. Does it pull? Does it catch? Does it bind? By the end of the second hour, Lena had stopped flinching. By the end of the third, she had started answering without thinking. It was near the end when Lena was back in her jeans and her flannel and sitting on the low platform drinking a glass of water Celeste had, without a word, put in her hand, that Celeste finally paused. She was making a note on a small leather-bound pad. She did not look up. May I give you some advice? Celeste said. Yes, the women you are about to be around. They will look at you the way I looked at you when you walked through that door. You will feel it. It will feel unkind. It is not unkind. It is what women do to other women when the other woman is new. I did it to you. I did it on purpose. You survived it. Good. Lena waited. Most of them will decide you are not worth the energy. A few of them will decide you are. The few that decide you are, those are the ones you watch. Not the men. The men are loud. The men are easy. The men announce themselves. The women do not. The women will be your problem. Okay. Celeste looked up from the pad. When Mr. Vale tells you which women, believe him, she said. He sees them better than anyone. He was raised by one. And before Lena could ask anything else, Celeste snapped the pad shut, picked up her bag, and was gone down the hallway so quickly that when Margaret came to collect Lena 5 minutes later, The sunroom already smelled like it had been empty for an hour. That night at dinner, Adrian asked her how the fitting had gone, and Lena said, "She hates me." And Adrian said without looking up from his plate, "No, she doesn't. She was rude to you, which means she thinks you'll survive. When she's polite to a woman, it's because she's given up on her. That's not a very nice way to live." "No." "Who is Whitmore?" He set down his fork. He considered her. "Benjamin Whitmore," he said, "is a man who owns a great deal of land in this country, and a great deal more in 2 countries he has never visited. He makes most of his money from things that live in the ground and things that grow on top of it. He is 71. He has been married 4 times. He is currently married to a woman named Caroline who is 43 years younger than he is and whom he met when she was 26, which you can do the math on if you like." "That's gross." "Yes. And you? You do business with him." "I have done business with him. On Thursday the 21st, I'm going to eat his food, sit next to his wife, and tell him by the end of the evening that I am not going to do business with him anymore. He doesn't know this yet. I want you there because Caroline Whitmore is one of the women Celeste was warning you about, and I would like Caroline Whitmore to spend the evening thinking about you instead of about what I am telling her husband. So I'm bait." "You are a shield," Adrian said. "There's a difference." "Is there?" "Yes. Bait is something you're willing to lose. A shield is something you stand behind. I will be standing behind you all night, Lena, and anything she throws that would have hit me will hit the dress instead, and the dress, as you've seen, is very good." She looked at him across the table. The candles between them were burning low. Inez had cleared the plates 10 minutes ago. Biscuit was asleep on the windowsill behind Adrian's left shoulder, which was a new spot for Biscuit. Biscuit, in general, had taken to this house with the air of a man arriving, finally, at the hotel he deserved. "Why does she throw things?" Lena said. "Caroline?" "Yes, because she married a man for his money who is now dying faster than she expected him to, and she is going to outlive him by 30 years. And she has figured out, lately, that the money and the man were not separable, and that when he goes, some of it will go with him, and she is angry about this, and she is looking for something to take. She has been looking at what I have for 3 years. She thinks that if I were softer on her, I would give her a way in. At Whitmore's dinner, she will take one more look, and she will see that I am not softer on her because you will be sitting next to me, and then she will stop looking. Does she know me? No. Will she try to? Yes. What do I tell her? Nothing. Nothing at all? He smiled. The first real smile she had seen on his face since she had come into this house. It was a small smile, one-sided, tired. "When she asks where you're from," he said, "you say here and there. When she asks what you do, you say I'm with Adrian. When she asks how you met, you say it's a long story, and you sip your drink, and you let her ask the next question. And when the next question is an insult dressed as a question, and it will be, she is very skilled, she has been doing this since before you were born. You smile at her like you cannot quite hear her, and you look at me, and I will answer it for you. And if she follows up, she won't. Women like Caroline Whitmore know the sound of a door closing. She will try the door 3 times. By the 3rd time, she will have moved on. Okay? He picked up his wine, he drank, he set it down. Lena? Yes. I want to ask you something. Okay. Your father. She went still. What about him? I know he left when you were 9. I know you haven't spoken to him since. I don't need more than that, but I need to know whether he knows about me yet. How would he? The car that picked you up was not a secret. The house is not a secret. The moment you walked into my kitchen, you became, to a certain class of person, visible. Some of them are people I do business with. Some of them are people who do not like me. In either case, people have already started asking about you. By the time we walk into Whitmore's house, they will have found everything there is to find, including your father. He's been gone for 15 years. Yes, he's never tried to find me. I believe you. But the question isn't whether he's tried to find you. The question is whether in the next week somebody tries to find him and whether he will take their phone call. Lena looked at her plate. She hadn't thought about her father in, she didn't know how long. Months, maybe. More than a year. He was not a wound anymore. He was a closed door in a hallway she did not walk down. She did not know where he lived. She did not know if he was alive. She did not know anything about him except that on a Saturday in March when she was 9 years old, he had put his work boots in a duffel bag and walked out the front door and down the block. And her mother had watched him go from the kitchen window with her arms crossed over her stomach and had said, without turning around, "Lena, honey, come here. I need help with the dishes." "Does he know my mother died?" Lena said. "Yes." "How do you know?" "He was informed by the hospital. She had listed him in her file as a next of kin. She did this in case you couldn't be reached, which you could be, but she did it anyway because she worried. He was contacted. He did not respond. He is currently living in Nevada. He has a job at a warehouse. He is not remarried. He is not, for what it's worth, well." "What does that mean?" "It means he drinks." "He always drank." "Yes." She put her fork down. She looked at the tablecloth. She did not want to look at Adrian's face right now because Adrian's face was going to have some kind of care on it, and she did not know what to do with care from him yet. "I don't want to see him," she said. "You don't have to." "If he calls." "He will not call you. He will not have a way to. I am telling you this because he may, in the next 2 weeks, be offered a significant amount of money by a stranger for an interview about you. If he takes the interview, I will know. If he turns it down, I will know that too. Either way, I wanted you to hear about it from me first, in case something appears later that you didn't expect. Can you stop him from taking it? I can make it so he doesn't want to take it. I can't stop him from opening his mouth. The only person who can stop someone from opening his mouth is himself. If he took it, what would he say about me?" Adrian looked at her for a long moment. "He would say," he said, "whatever he needed to say to get through the interview and to be paid for it. He would exaggerate. He would simplify. He would make himself look better than he was. He would make your mother look worse than she was. He would say nothing about you that you didn't already know in your own body. He would embarrass himself and he would embarrass you, and then it would be over. And a few people in Caroline Whitmore's world would feel, for about a week, that they had a piece of you, and then it would fade. Things always fade. And if he doesn't take it, then it never happened. Will you tell me either way?" "Yes." "Promise me." He paused. It was a small pause, but she saw it, and she was learning to see his small pauses. "I promise I will tell you either way," he said. "And I will tell you about this kind of thing, the whole way through. Anything about you that someone goes looking for, I will tell you they went looking, and I will tell you what they found. That's the deal in this house. That's the only way this works." She nodded. She did not trust her voice. Adrian watched her for a second longer, and then, quietly, he picked up his wine again, and he turned the conversation, and he said, "Inez made a dessert. She's very proud of it. You're going to have to eat some of it, or she'll be upset." "What is it?" "I don't know, something with pears. She asked me what your favorite fruit was, and I realized I didn't know, and I told her pears because pears are difficult to dislike." "Pears are fine." "Then we are saved." And he smiled at her again, that same small one-sided smile, and the pears were delicious. And Lena went to bed that night with her hands lotioned up for the first time in her life, and she slept better than she had any right to. And the next morning when she came downstairs, she found that the woman she was starting to become had already begun, whether she had agreed to it or not. The days between that dinner and Whitmore's dinner fell into a shape Lena had not expected. In the mornings, she walked. She had not walked, really, in years. Walking in her old neighborhood meant walking to something, to the bus, to the store, to the laundromat. But here she walked because there was nowhere she had to be, and because the lawn went all the way down to the lake, and the lake had a path around it. Biscuit came with her the first morning and made it 10 feet and then sat down on the gravel and yowled until she carried him back to the porch. After that, she walked alone. In the afternoons, she read. The library in the house was long and dim and smelled like paper and cedar, and the shelves went from the floor to the ceiling, and there was a rolling ladder that actually rolled, which she was delighted to find, in a way she did not let anyone see. She pulled down books at random. A history of the silk trade. A slim volume of poetry by a woman she had never heard of. A detective novel from 1938 with the pages going brown at the edges. She read in the big chair by the window. Biscuit slept on the arm of the chair. Margaret brought tea at 4 o'clock without being asked. In the evenings, she ate with Adrian. This was the only part of the day she could not predict. Some evenings he talked. Some evenings he didn't. Some evenings he asked her about her mother, and she told him things she had not told anyone, about her mother's laugh, about the way her mother had danced in the kitchen when she thought nobody was watching, about the bad Christmas when the heat had gone out and they had slept in the living room under every blanket they owned, and her mother had made it into a game. Adrian listened. He did not interrupt. He did not offer to fix anything. When she was done, sometimes he said something about something else entirely, about a book he had read, or about a man he had done business with once, or about a bird he had seen on the lawn, and she understood, after the third or fourth time, that this was how he told her he had heard her. He did not say, "Thank you for telling me." He did not say, "That must have been hard." He changed the subject gently, and he kept the things she had told him in some interior room of himself that he did not take her into, but she could tell the room was there, and she could tell he was being careful in it. Some evenings he asked her questions she didn't want to answer, and she told him that, and he moved on without pressing. Once, on the fourth night, she asked him a question back. "Your mother," she said, "Celeste said you were raised by a woman like Caroline Whitmore." Adrian, who had been about to drink his wine, set the glass down. "Celeste said that." "Yes. Celeste talks too much." She said one sentence. One is too many sometimes. He didn't answer the question. He looked at the candles. He looked at the wine. He looked finally at Lena. "My mother," he said, "was beautiful. She was intelligent. She was not kind. She did not love my father, and she did not love me, and she did not love my sister, but she understood better than any human being I have ever met what other people wanted to see when they looked at her. She built a life on that understanding. It was a very comfortable life. It did not make her happy. I don't know if anything could have. Is she still alive?" "No." "Your sister?" "Yes. She lives in Geneva. We speak twice a year. She does not like me. I don't blame her." "Why doesn't she like you?" "Because when we were children, I learned how to survive our mother, and my sister did not. And the way I survived was by becoming good at things my sister thought were shameful. She was not wrong, but she also did not at the time offer a better idea." "What things?" He looked at her. "Another time," he said quietly. "Please." And Lena did not push, because she was learning too. She was learning that the price of asking him anything was that he would answer eventually, and that the answers cost him something, and that she did not yet know what the exchange rate was. On the seventh day, the car came for them at 5 p.m. Lena had been dressed since 3. The green dress, the first of the 8, had been laid out on her bed by someone she hadn't seen, with a small pair of earrings and a pair of low black heels that Celeste had sworn to her would not destroy her feet, and that, to Lena's surprise, did not. Her hair had been cut that morning, 3 inches, exactly as Celeste had said, and she had been shown how to pin it back in a way that took her 20 minutes and looked, in the mirror, as if it had taken her 3 seconds. Her hand smelled like almond oil. Her knuckles had almost healed. She came down the main staircase at 4:45. Adrian was at the bottom of it. He was in a dark suit. Not black, a very deep, very soft gray, cut in a way that made him look taller than he was and simpler than he was. A white shirt, no tie. He had a small object in his hand, a little leather box. And when she came down the last 2 steps, he held it out. "Before we go," he said, "what is it?" "Open it." She opened it. It was a pin, a small gold pin, no bigger than her thumbnail, in the shape of a leaf. It was not flashy. It looked, in her palm, like something a grandmother might have worn. "It was my mother's," he said. "She was not a good woman. The pin is a good pin. She doesn't deserve it. I thought tonight you might wear it. Not because I want you to, because there are going to be people there who knew her. And when they see it on you, it is going to mean to them what I mean for it to mean, which is that I chose this, and I chose you, and the conversation is closed before they open it." Lena looked at the pin in her hand. She looked up at Adrian. "Is this going to make things easier for me?" she said. "Or harder?" "Easier." "And for you?" He paused. "Harder," he said. "For me it will be harder. But the harder is on my side. I can hold it. The easier is on your side. And tonight, between those two, I want the easier to be on you." She looked at the pin. She put it on, carefully, at the collar of the dress, just below the collarbone. Adrian's hands did not come up to help. He watched her do it herself, which, she was beginning to understand, was a kind of respect he gave her in 1,000 small ways, and which she had not yet met anyone else in her life who gave. She turned toward the mirror in the entrance hall. The woman in it looked for a moment like a woman who had been going to dinners like this all her life. Then Lena blinked, and the moment passed, and she was herself again, in a dress, in a borrowed pin, in shoes she did not yet know how to run in. "Okay," she said. "Let's go." Adrian held out his arm. She took it, and the car door closed behind them both, and the house fell away behind them in the rear view, and the long gravel drive wound out between the dark trees toward the road, and Lena did not speak on the ride, and Adrian did not ask her to, and by the time the car rolled up to Whitmore's gates 40 minutes later, past a line of other black cars already waiting, past a doorman with a clipboard, past the small, tired, tight-smiling woman who was clearly Caroline Whitmore herself, and who was already watching their car from the top of the stone steps with the attention of a falcon that has seen a movement in a hedge. By the time the car stopped and the door opened, and Adrian offered his hand down to Lena from outside, and Lena stepped down onto the gravel in her black heels with her mother's old sneakers nowhere on her body anymore. By then, Lena Cross had stopped being entirely the woman who had scrubbed pans at the Meridian Hotel 8 nights ago. She had not become someone else. That was the strange part. She had become more of herself, a self she had been carrying quietly all along, somewhere under the flannel and the grease and the fluorescent light. She had not known she had her. She had not known, maybe, that she could have her. She lifted her chin. Adrian's hand closed around hers, and he drew her up beside him, and at the top of the steps, Caroline Whitmore's smile widened by a precise, practiced, deadly quarter-inch as she watched them come. "Adrian," Caroline called down, bright as a bell. "You made it, and you brought someone." Adrian smiled up at her. It was not the smile Lena had seen at dinner. It was a different smile, a polished one, a smile he had put on like a coat. "Caroline," he said. "I did," and Lena, at his side, did exactly what he had told her to do. She smiled the smile of a woman who had not quite heard. She let her eyes land on Caroline's face and pass through it. She let Adrian's hand stay at her back, warm and steady, the pin cool at her collar. They went up the steps, the doors opened, and the room, when they stepped into it, went very briefly, very certainly, very completely quiet. The small involuntary hush of 100 expensive people noticing the same thing at the same time. And then the room started up again, louder than before, the way a room does when it has decided to pretend nothing has happened. Adrian did not look at her. He said, very quietly, out of the side of his mouth, "Well done." Lena did not look at him either. She said just as quietly, "I haven't done anything yet." "You walked in," he said. That was the hard part. A waiter materialized with a tray. Adrian took 2 glasses without looking. He put one in her hand. The glass was cold. The bubbles moved in it the way small fish move. Caroline Whitmore was crossing the room toward them now, arms out, all teeth. Adrian's hand at the small of Lena's back pressed once, a signal, steady, the smallest pressure of a thumb against the fabric of the dress. Lena took a breath, and she stepped forward to meet her. Caroline Whitmore kissed the air beside Adrian's left cheek, and then, without pausing, beside his right. And then she turned her full attention on Lena the way a searchlight turns on a fence. "And you," she said. "You are." "Lena." "Lena." "Yes." "Just Lena." "Just Lena." Caroline's smile did not move, but something behind her eyes did. She extended her hand. The hand was manicured and warm and very small, and Lena shook it, once the way Celeste had told her to, a single firm pulse, no pump, no lingering. And then she let go. "How lovely," Caroline said. "I don't think Adrian has brought anyone to this dinner in—" "Adrian, how long?" "A while," Adrian said. "A while," Caroline repeated, in the tone of a woman who already knew the answer and was making Adrian say it smaller. "Well, welcome to our home, Lena. Benjamin is in the library terrorizing the senator from Ohio. He'll come out when he smells food. Please, come in, come in." She turned on her heel. The crowd parted for her without appearing to. It was a small trick. Very polished, the kind of trick Lena had seen Marco try 100 times at the Meridian and never quite land. Caroline did it without thinking. Adrian's hand stayed at Lena's back. "Breathe," he said very quietly. "I'm breathing." "Breathe slower." She breathed slower. The room she was walking through was longer than her entire apartment building, with a vaulted ceiling of painted beams and a fireplace at the far end so large she could have stood inside it without ducking. There were maybe 60 people, maybe 70. Most of the men were older than Adrian by 20 years at least. Most of the women were either the same age as their husbands, or like Caroline, much younger. Everyone held a glass. Everyone was talking. Nobody was listening. But everyone was pretending to listen, and the pretending was being done at a very high level. And Lena, walking through it on Adrian's arm, felt for the first time what Celeste had meant about daylight versus dressing rooms. In this room, everything was daylight, every flaw visible, every cuff measured, every woman cataloging every other woman's dress in passing, not cruelly, not exactly, just the way a banker counts cash. Adrian stopped by this fireplace. He took a slow sip of his champagne. He nodded at a man across the room, a tall, gray-haired man with a careful face, and the man nodded back. Adrian did not introduce her to him. He did not introduce her, she noticed, to anyone. He simply stood with her near the fire, one hand on her back, the other around the stem of his glass, and he let the room come to them instead of going to it. It took 4 minutes. A woman approached first, red-haired, about 50, in a dress Lena's eye could not help pricing at something absurd. "Adrian," the woman said, "I've been looking for you." "Margot. This must be—" "Lena," Adrian said. "Hello, Lena." "Hi." "What do you do, Lena?" There it was, the first question. Lena felt the pressure of Adrian's thumb, small and steady, at her back. "I'm with Adrian," she said. Margot's smile did not falter. If anything, it warmed. "Of course," Margot said, and she did not ask another question. She looked at Adrian. "Have you been to see the horses?" "Not yet." "You should. Ben had one shipped from Kentucky. He thinks it's magnificent. I think it looks like a mule. Horses generally don't do well when Ben names them. He's named this one Triumph. Then it has no chance." Margot laughed, low and genuine. Adrian did too. A short, real sound Lena had not yet heard from him. For 1 second, she saw him the way some of these women must have always seen him. A man who had a laugh for the right person. A man who had known them for decades. A man who moved in this room the way Biscuit moved on a 200-year-old chair, which was like he belonged there, and like anyone who disagreed was wrong. Margot turned away after another minute with a light, tapping goodbye on Adrian's sleeve, and then the next person came, and the next. It went on like that for almost an hour. Lena said almost nothing. When she did say something, it was to say her name, or to say thank you to a waiter, or once, to say I'm with Adrian, which, she was beginning to understand, was a sentence with many functions, and worked on every kind of question anyone could think to ask her. The trick was the smile. Celeste had been right. It was not a smile that said, "I am pleased to meet you." It was a smile that said, "I have already decided not to care what you think." She didn't know, before tonight, that she had that smile in her. She was not sure where it had come from. Maybe, she thought, from 8 months of Marco. Maybe from the bus shelter. Maybe from the mattress on the floor. Caroline Whitmore came back for her at 7:30. "Lena, darling." Caroline's hand at her elbow, light but certain. "Adrian, you don't mind if I steal her just for a minute. I want to show her the conservatory." Adrian's hand at Lena's back did not press. "Of course," he said. He met Lena's eyes briefly. He said, "I'll find you in 10 minutes." It was not a question. It was not a permission. It was a statement of time made in front of Caroline, and Lena heard it for what it was, a leash with a length on it, and she nodded once and let Caroline steer her away. The conservatory was off the back of the house, down a short paneled hallway, through a set of glass doors. It was full of plants Lena could not name, most of them taller than she was, and it smelled green and damp and faintly of chlorophyll, which was not a word Lena knew she knew until Caroline used it. The light in the room was low and gold and came from small lamps hidden among the leaves. There was nobody else there. "I had this built 5 years ago," Caroline said, "when we married. Ben doesn't come in here. He hates plants. He says they eat the oxygen. I tell him plants make oxygen. He tells me not to correct him. So, a small laugh, the laugh of a woman who had told this story many times and was done being hurt by it. Here we are. It's beautiful. Thank you. Caroline walked her slowly down the central path between the plants. She did not hold Lena's arm anymore. She did not need to. How long have you known Adrian? She asked. A little while. A little while. Yes. How did you meet? It's a long story. Caroline laughed again. It was a different laugh than the one she had done for the plants. Oh, you're good, she said. Somebody has taught you. I don't know what you mean. Yes, you do. Caroline stopped at a bench set between two enormous ferns. She sat. She patted the bench next to her. Lena, after a half-second's calculation, sat. Celeste, is it? It's always Celeste. I don't know that name. Of course you don't. Caroline crossed her legs. She was, up close, even smaller than she had looked from the top of the stairs. A compact, precisely put-together woman with a mouth that stayed still when she smiled, which is a thing Lena's mother had once told her to watch for in other women, although her mother had been talking about neighbors, not heiresses. Lena, Caroline said, can I be honest with you? Please. I like you. Oh, I do. I mean it. You handled that room better than women I've known for 20 years would have. I watched you from across the fireplace. You didn't drink too fast. You didn't laugh at things that weren't funny. You didn't try to be anyone's friend. That's really rare, especially from someone your age. Thank you. So I'm going to talk to you like a friend, even though we aren't, because I think nobody else is going to, and I think you deserve to know. Lena said nothing. Adrian is in the middle of a fight right now, Caroline said, that he is not going to win. I know him. I've known him for 8 years. I've known him longer than you've known his last name. He has a way of taking on things he can't lift, and the last time he did it, it cost him people. People he cared about. There's a woman in Portland who used to sit where you're sitting, and she had to leave the country for 3 months afterward because of what happened while she was here. Did he tell you her name? No. Ah. He told me she lives in Portland, that she runs a bookstore, that she had a daughter. Caroline paused. For the first time since Lena had met her, there was a small flicker of something in her face that wasn't performance. Surprise, maybe. The surprise of being told a piece of information she had not known. He told you that? Yes. Interesting. Why interesting? Because most men don't tell the new one about the old one, especially if the old one still has a way of coming up at dinners. Lena did not answer. Lena, Caroline's voice was softer now. I'm not trying to scare you. I'm really not. I'm trying to tell you, woman to woman, that the dinner tonight is not a dinner. It's a meeting. Adrian is here to tell Benjamin something Benjamin doesn't want to hear. When Benjamin hears it, he is going to react badly. Benjamin always reacts badly. And when the reaction is over, there will be people in this room who will decide that Adrian has embarrassed them. And those people are not people you embarrass without cost. Do you understand what I'm telling you? Duple? B? I think so. What I'm telling you is that in 3 weeks, or 4, or 8, there is going to be a night, and you'll remember this conversation. There's going to be a night when Adrian doesn't come home on time. And then there's going to be a week when he doesn't tell you where he's been. And then there's going to be a morning when someone knocks on the door of that big quiet house of his at 6 in the morning. And it's going to be a man with a badge, or it's going to be a man without one. And either way, you're not going to like what he has to say. Lena looked at her. And you're telling me this? Lena said. Because you seem like a girl who deserves to know before, instead of after. That's kind of you. I'm not kind. No, Lena said. I didn't think you were. Caroline smiled. It was a small smile, almost rueful. There it is, Caroline said. I was wondering if you had that in you. I think you were testing for it. I think I was. They sat for a moment. A drop of water fell from somewhere in the ferns behind them and made a small clean sound against a stone. Caroline? Yes. I know what you're doing. Oh, darling, I know you do. You're trying to get me to go home tonight, or tomorrow, and tell him I'm done, and leave his house. and take a small settlement, which you will then help me understand I deserve to be bigger, and which will then become your lever on him for the next thing you want, which is not me, because you don't want me. You've never wanted me. You want something that went into his bookkeeping 11 years ago that you think you should have had access to and didn't. And if I leave, you get leverage. If I stay, you don't. It's that simple. Caroline did not react for 3 full seconds. Then slowly, she began to laugh. It was a real laugh. Not big, not loud. A small, low, private laugh. The laugh of a woman finding, unexpectedly, that her opponent had been better dressed than she'd thought. She laughed for about 5 seconds, and then she wiped at the corner of her eye with the back of one knuckle, carefully, so as not to disturb her mascara, and she said, "Who taught you to talk like that?" "Nobody. I just listened to you." "Where are you from, Lena?" "A place." "Was it cold?" "Yes." "I thought so." Caroline stood. She smoothed her dress at the hip. She held out her hand, not to shake, but to pull Lena up, and Lena, after a half-second, took it, and Caroline pulled her up lightly, and they stood, for a moment, 2 women in beautiful dresses in a room full of plants, and Caroline's small, warm hand was still holding Lena's. "He chose better than I thought he would," Caroline said. "I didn't do anything." "You did one thing. You didn't lie to me." "I haven't told you anything." "That is the thing." She let go of Lena's hand. She looked, for a beat, at the leaf pin at Lena's collar. She had, of course, seen it the moment Lena walked through the door, and had not mentioned it, which Lena had noted. Caroline reached up slowly, and with one fingertip she touched, lightly, the edge of the pin. "Hannah Vales," she said quietly. "I never liked her. She never liked me. I'm almost impressed he gave it to you." "He said it was the easier path for me." "It is. And the harder path for him." "He said that too." "Did he?" Caroline looked at her for another long second. Then she turned and walked toward the glass doors and said, over her shoulder, in a lighter voice, the voice from the top of the stairs, "Come on, darling. Dinner's about to be announced. Let's go find your man before he sends a search party." She pushed the glass door open. Lena followed her through it, back into the warm noise and the gold light and the perfume and the smell of roasting lamb coming from somewhere deep in the house. And as she walked back into the main room, she saw Adrian across the crowd immediately, because he had been watching the door, and because the moment he saw her face he knew, the way a dog knows, that she had survived. He crossed the room without appearing to hurry. He was at her side before Caroline had finished turning to greet the next couple. "Walk with me," he said, low. "Where?" "Slowly, to the dining room. Don't look back." She walked. He walked with her, hand at her back again, and he said quietly, almost into her ear, without looking at her, without slowing his pace, smiling at people as he went. "What did she say?" "She told me you're about to lose a fight." "What else?" "She told me there's going to be a night you don't come home on time." "What else?" "She told me about the woman in Portland. Not what happened. That something happened. She said she had to leave the country for 3 months." A muscle moved in Adrian's jaw. It was the first visible thing his face had done all night. "Go on," he said. "She told me she thought I deserved to know before instead of after." "And?" "And I told her I knew what she was doing." "You said that?" "Yes. In those words. More or less." He did not answer right away. They were approaching the dining room. A staff member Lena didn't know was holding one of the double doors open. Adrian slowed just a fraction. He leaned in. His mouth was at her ear for less than a second, and what he said in that second she would remember for the rest of her life. "I'm going to get through this dinner, and then I'm going to take you home. And then I'm going to tell you what happened in Portland, every part of it, because you have earned it tonight." He straightened. He smiled at the staff member at the door. He put his hand at the small of Lena's back. They stepped into the dining room together, and the room was 50 feet long, and the table was set for 48, and there were 3 chandeliers and there were orchids, and Lena, somehow, did not notice any of it, because her heart was beating so hard under the dress that she was certain that the little gold leaf pin at her collar was going to fly off onto the floor. Benjamin Whitmore was at the head of the table. He was a great stump of a man, 71 and not hiding it, with the skin of a man who had spent his whole life outside and a full head of white hair. He clearly considered a personal accomplishment. He did not stand when Adrian came in. He did not rise when his own wife came in. He simply raised a heavy crystal glass in Adrian's direction and called, across the room, in a voice that carried, "Vale, sit. On my left." Adrian sat on his left. Lena was placed 2 seats down from Adrian, not next to him. She did not let herself react. She had been told by Celeste that the seating was not Adrian's to control and that she would not necessarily be next to him, and that she should not take it personally. The woman to her right was maybe 70, a thin, small, silver-haired woman in lavender who immediately turned to her and said, "My dear, I understand nothing about current music. Please tell me what young people are listening to so that I can pretend to my grandchildren tomorrow." Lena laughed. It was a surprised laugh. She had not known, until that moment, that laughter was permitted at this table. She leaned toward the woman. "I don't know what young people listen to either. I have a cat." "You have a cat," the woman said, delighted. "Tell me about your cat." And for the next 20 minutes, over the first course, Lena told a small silver-haired stranger about Biscuit, about the 200-year-old chair, about the way Biscuit had, the morning before, knocked over a vase in the hallway and then sat next to the broken vase looking directly at Margaret until Margaret had, somehow, apologized to the cat. The silver-haired woman, whose name was Dorothy, laughed quietly into her napkin at every second sentence. At the head of the table, Adrian was speaking with Benjamin, low voices, not unfriendly, not yet. Lena did not look. The second course came. The third. It was during the fourth, a small plate of something with pears, which made Lena think of Inez back at the house, and made her miss, suddenly and sharply, a kitchen she had only been in for 8 days. That Benjamin's voice rose. It was not a shout. Benjamin Whitmore was not a man who needed to shout. It was a lifted, curdled, heavy voice, the voice of a man accustomed to having his volume obeyed. "Say that again," he said. The table quieted, not all at once. First the people closest to him, then the people near them. Adrian did not look at anyone else. He was looking at Benjamin. His face had not changed. "I said," Adrian said, clearly, evenly, "that I'm not continuing with the Dunbar arrangement. I've made other decisions. I'm telling you now because I wanted you to hear it from me, at this table, before anyone else in this room hears it. I owe you that. I'm telling you now so that the work I had with you ends cleanly, and tonight, and does not become something we carry into next year. You owe me that. Yes, you owe me that. Ben, after everything I have done for you, everything, I brought you into this house. I brought you in front of these people. Ben, Adrian said, still not moving, still not loud. Stop. Not here. Not at your table. Walk it back. And the strangest thing happened then, which Lena would think about for weeks afterward. Benjamin Whitmore. Benjamin, who owned oil in 3 countries, who had a horse named Triumph, who had buried 3 wives and was on his 4th. Benjamin. Whitmore stopped. He did not stop because he wanted to stop. He stopped because Adrian's voice had gone very soft, and the soft voice had sat him down like a hand on a shoulder. Benjamin stared at Adrian for 4 seconds. Then he said quietly, "We'll talk after dinner." "Of course." "In the library?" "Of course." Benjamin picked up his glass. He drank from it. The conversation at the table, which had paused, resumed all at once the way a flock of starlings resumes after a hawk passes through. Dorothy, beside Lena, said softly, "Oh dear," and then went right back to telling Lena about a dog she had owned in 1968. Lena let her eyes go, just once, to Adrian. He did not look at her, but he reached very casually for his water glass, and he drank from it, and as he set it back down, his little finger, deliberately, briefly, touched the base of her wine glass, 2 seats down, and it was the smallest thing in the world. And it meant, "I see you, I'm here, I'm fine," and Lena understood it without having been taught. She touched the stem of her wine glass back very lightly with one fingertip. She did not know if he saw. She thought he did. The rest of the dinner passed without incident. Coffee was served in the library, not, thankfully, the library where Benjamin and Adrian were going to have their conversation, but another library at the other end of the house, because of course a man like Benjamin had 2. Caroline circulated. She kissed people goodbye on the cheek. At one point, across the room, She caught Lena's eye over the shoulder of a man she was pretending to listen to, and she lifted her glass, very slightly, to Lena, and Lena, after a breath, lifted hers back. It was almost 11 by the time Adrian found her. He came through the crowd without seeming to, the way he did, and he took the coffee cup out of her hand and he set it on a side table, and he said simply, "We're going." It's done. Are you outside? In the car, with the door closed and the city moving by in the dark windows, Lena finally let herself breathe. Adrian sat across from her. Thomas was driving. The glass between the driver's seat and the back had been raised. Lena hadn't known there was a glass. And the back of the car was quiet and warm, and there was a bottle of water in a small holder that she took and opened and drank from almost without thinking. She was shaking. She had not realized she was shaking until she saw the water trembling in the bottle in her hand. "Hey," Adrian said. "Hey, Lena, look at me." She looked at him. "You were excellent," he said. "Do you understand me? You were better than excellent. I have watched people who were raised in those rooms come apart tonight, and you did not come apart. I almost did, in the conservatory. But you didn't. No, that's all that matters." She laughed, thin. "She told me things," Lena said, "and I don't know how much of them were true, and I don't know. I told you I'd tell you." "Yes, I'm going to. Tonight. When we get home. I'll tell you anything you want to know about Portland, and anything else you want to know, and we can stop anytime. And tomorrow you can decide what you want to decide. About staying, about going, about any of it." Adrian. "Yes. I'm not going anywhere tonight. I'm too tired." A small, tired, real smile pulled at the corner of his mouth. "Okay," he said. "Fair. Tomorrow." Tomorrow. They rode in silence for a while. The city gave way to the river. The river gave way to the trees. Lena leaned her head against the window, and she closed her eyes for just a second, and the next thing she knew they were on the gravel drive, and Adrian's hand was on her shoulder, and he was saying very gently, "Lena, we're home." Home. Neither of them remarked on the word. The house was quiet. Margaret had left a single lamp on in the entrance hall and then gone to bed. Biscuit came out from the sitting room as soon as the front door opened, tail in the air, chirping the little chirp he had started to do since they'd moved here. Lena bent and scooped him up. He was warm and heavy, and his fur smelled like the chair. "Upstairs," Adrian said. "In a minute. I want to just sit for a minute." "Okay." She went into the sitting room. She sat in the chair, his chair, Biscuit's chair, her chair now too, she supposed, if anything in this house had become a her yet, and she sat holding Biscuit and looking at nothing for a long minute. Adrian came in behind her. He did not sit. He stood at the window with his hands in his pockets, looking out at the dark lawn. "You asked me," he said without turning, "why I do this." "Yes." "Why I take someone for 6 months." "Yes." He paused. 9 years ago," he said, "I was married." Lena did not move. She was 26. I was 28. We had known each other since we were children. Our families had known each other since before we were born. Both families were people like the people you saw tonight. Maybe a little quieter, but the same kind. She was the first person who ever looked at me and saw a person and not a last name. And I loved her. I loved her the way you love someone when you are too young to know that loving someone is dangerous. What happened? She was killed. Lena's hand stopped on Biscuit's back. By somebody, Adrian went on, who wanted to hurt my father. She was killed because of him, not because of me, but the distinction is not meaningful. She was killed because of my name. She was in a car on a road outside the city, and another car. It doesn't matter. She was killed. She was 2 months pregnant. I did not know she was pregnant until after she was gone, because she had been waiting for the right moment to tell me, and there had been no right moment. She had been waiting for 2 weeks. Lena could not speak. I did not handle it well, Adrian said. His voice was very even. I did things. The things I did were not legal, and they were not kind, and they were, in several cases, final. My father died separately of his own illness 6 months later. I inherited what he had, and I rebuilt. And I decided in that rebuilding that I would never again be in a room with a woman I cared about and a person who would want to hurt me in the same room. But you, I have been at dinners for 9 years, alone. Women in those rooms interpret a man alone as a man available. They do not stop trying. It became a problem for reasons of business, for reasons of peace. 3 years ago, a friend suggested an arrangement. A woman I did not know. 6 months at a time. No intimacy. No emotional claim. A companion in the rooms. A stranger when the rooms were empty. Because a stranger can't be used against you. Because a stranger, at the end of 6 months, leaves. And if she leaves, she is not in any room I am in, which means she is not at risk. But I'm in a room with you now. Yes? Doesn't that? The risk is not the rooms we are in together. The risk is the rooms I am in without you that someone hears about and then decides you are a way to reach me. That is the risk. And as long as what is between us is known to be temporary and transactional, that risk is manageable. The other women, the first 3, they were never threatened. Not once in 3 years. The woman in Portland. Adrian was quiet. The woman in Portland, he said at last, was the second one. She left me after 4 months instead of 6. She left because she found out, through a photograph, nothing dramatic, that I had been the one 9 years ago who had decided what to do about the man who had killed my wife. And she was not prepared to be in a house with me after she knew. She said that to me, and I agreed with her, and I paid her what I had promised, and more, and she left. She went home to her parents in Portland. 3 weeks after she left, a man came to her parents' house. He was trying to find me through her. She had already bought a ticket to leave the country. She left the next morning. She was gone for 3 months. When she came back, she went to Portland properly. She started a business. She eventually met a good man. He is, I believe, genuinely a good man. They have a child now. She has not spoken to me in 7 years. She is safe because she is far. And I have made sure every year that she stays safe, without her knowing. That is the one thing I still do for her. You have people watching her. I have people near her, nobody watching her, nobody who would know her if they walked past her on the street. But if something happened in her town, I would hear about it within a day. Oh, I tell you this, Adrian said, still not turning from the window, because Caroline hinted at it, and Caroline hinted at it because Caroline has wanted for a long time a piece of my life to hold over me. And she thinks, tonight, that she has given you the hint that will make you leave. And she is going to be disappointed, because I have told you what she hinted at, and now she has nothing. Lena held Biscuit. She stroked the space between his ears slowly over and over. Adrian. Yes. The pregnant wife. Yes. Is that why you do 6 months? Because your wife was... He did not answer for a long moment. Then he said quietly, yes. Yes to what? Yes to all of it. Yes to why 6 months. Yes to why not longer. Yes to why there is no intimacy in the agreement. Yes to why I pay them to leave. Because when you let someone stay long enough to matter, they stop being a stranger. And when they stop being a stranger, they are no longer safe from the world I live in. And I am not willing, ever again, to be the reason someone I care about is in a car on a road outside the city. Lena was crying. She had not realized she had started. One tear and then another onto Biscuit's back. Biscuit did not mind. So in 6 months, she said, you're going to pay me and I'm going to leave. Yes. And you're never going to call me. No. And if I ever try to call you, I won't answer. Adrian? Yes. I know what it is. You're telling me this now. Yes. Why now? Why tonight? He turned finally from the window. The lamp in the hall behind him was the only light. His face was half shadow and half gold. He looked, for just a second, not polished, not composed, not any of the things he was paid to be. He looked like a man who had, that evening, lost a fight he had chosen to pick, on purpose, and had come home with the cost of it on his shoulders. Because, he said, I watched you walk into that house tonight, And I watched you walk into that dinner, and I watched you survive a woman who eats women for a living, and I realized something I did not want to realize, which is that you are not going to be a stranger in 6 months. You are already not a stranger. You have been here 8 days, and you are already not a stranger. And that is a problem I do not have a solution to. And I thought you should know that it is a problem, tonight, before it gets any worse. Lena held Biscuit. She did not say anything for a long time. Adrian, across the room, did not move. Outside, somewhere on the lawn, a night bird called once, and then did not call again. "Okay," Lena said, finally, quietly. "Okay." She didn't know what she meant by it. He didn't ask. She stood up, holding the cat. Her feet ached. Her dress felt suddenly very heavy. Her eyes were wet, and she did not wipe them because wiping them would have been its own kind of statement, and she was too tired to make statements. She walked past Adrian on her way to the staircase. He did not reach for her. He did not ask her to stay. She did not stop. At the foot of the stairs, she paused, with one hand on the banister and the cat warm against her chest. "Adrian?" "Yes. Thank you for telling me." He did not answer right away. "Good night, Lena," he said finally. "Good night, Adrian." She went up the stairs. Biscuit purred against her collarbone, right over the little gold leaf pin, which she had forgotten she was still wearing. She reached the landing. She did not look back. Down at the end of the hall, she heard the soft click of a door. His study, maybe, or some other room she had not been in. And then the house went quiet again, the way this house went quiet, like a stone. Lena went into her room. She closed the door behind her. She did not turn on the light. She stood in the dark for a long moment with the cat in her arms and the window silver in front of her, the lawn pale under a moon she hadn't noticed coming up, the lake a flat line at the end of the trees. She set Biscuit down on the bed. She unpinned the leaf carefully, and she put it in the little dish on the nightstand, where it lay small and bright and old and not hers. Then she sat on the edge of the mattress in the dark, and she put her face in her hands, and she did not sob. She did not make a sound. She just sat there for a long time, breathing, while the cat curled up against her hip and the moon moved an inch across the floor, and somewhere in the body that she was only beginning to think of as her own, something, some last small careful wall, had come loose and was not going to go back the way it had been. She slept, in the end, very badly, and when she woke at 6:15, the sky was the color of wet slate, and Biscuit was already at the door, waiting to be let out. She pulled on jeans and a sweater, clothes she had owned before this house, and she carried the cat downstairs in her arms. And in the kitchen, Inez was making coffee and did not ask about her face, which Lena knew, without having to look in a mirror, was puffy in a way that would not disguise itself. "He's not in the house," Inez said, setting a cup in front of her. "Okay. He went out at 5. "Okay. He left you this." It was a folded piece of paper on the table next to the sugar. Lena looked at it for a moment, then she opened it. "Walk with me when I get back. Nothing you need to say." "Hey." She folded it, she put it in the pocket of her jeans, she drank the coffee. The weeks that followed did not go the way she had thought they would. There was no great conversation about Portland. There was no morning where they sat at the long kitchen table and settled what they were. Instead, there were small things. A hand at her elbow on the way into a room, a longer silence after dinner that neither of them moved to end, a second walk around the lake in the afternoon where they did not speak for 40 minutes and did not need to. There was the night of the Kensington wedding, where a man she'd never seen before watched her too long from across the ballroom, and Adrian, without changing his face, stepped between them the way a father steps between a child in traffic. And Lena understood, standing in his shadow, that something in the arrangement had quietly stopped being an arrangement. There was the week in Italy, which she had not believed was going to happen until the plane actually lifted off the ground. And then the small white hotel above a road that wound down to a sea she had only ever seen in other people's photographs. And a morning where she stood on the little balcony in bare feet with a cup of coffee, and Adrian came up behind her, not touching her, and stood next to her, and they watched a fishing boat move along the water for a long time without talking, and she thought, this is the part I am going to remember. She thought also on that balcony, 6 months is not going to be enough. And he knows it, and I know it, and neither of us is going to say it out loud. They did not say it out loud for a long time. They were back in the house, and it was deep into the 2nd month when she missed her period. She did not mention it. She told herself she was tired, she was traveling, she was eating differently than she had ever eaten. She was in a body that had spent 2 years running on caffeine and unkindness and was now, slowly, being fed. Bodies reacted to that. Bodies were not clocks. She knew this. She told herself this for 11 days. On the 12th day, she walked into a drugstore in a town she was not known in, while Thomas waited in the car, and she bought a box with 2 tests in it. And when she was back at the house, she locked herself in the bathroom off her bedroom and followed the instructions on the back of the box. And she set the stick on the edge of the sink, and she sat on the cold tile floor with her back against the tub, and she waited the 3 minutes, which were the longest 3 minutes of her life. When she picked up the stick, her hand was not shaking. That was the part she would remember. She sat there for a while, on the bathroom floor, holding the little piece of plastic. And the first thing she felt, before anything else, before panic, before joy, before fear, the first thing was a kind of tired clarity, the kind that comes after a long day when there is finally nothing more to decide. Then the other things came, all at once. She did not tell him that day. She did not tell him the next day. She told herself she was waiting for the right moment, and she was lying to herself about that, because she had been in this house long enough to know that there was never a right moment for anything, and that the right moment was usually the moment you forced yourself to open your mouth. But she also knew what she was going to break, or try not to break, when she told him. He had already told her what he had lost the last time a woman had tried to tell him this. He had told her in the sitting room, in the dark, 9 weeks ago, and she had not forgotten a single sentence of it. She decided she would tell him on Sunday. It was Thursday. She gave herself 3 days to hold it in her own hands first. She did not get 3 days. It was Friday afternoon, a little after 2, and she was walking on the path around the lake because she could not sit still, and Biscuit, who had recently started following her the whole way around the lake, instead of quitting at the porch, as if some piece of the cat had finally decided to commit, was on the path 10 feet ahead of her, and she was watching the cat, not the path, when a man stepped out of the trees. He was not one of Adrian's people. She knew that immediately. She did not know how she knew. Something about the way he held his shoulders. "Miss Cross," he said. She stopped. "Don't run," the man said. "Please, I'd rather not chase you. I've got a bad knee." He was maybe 40. He was dressed in dark clothes that were not remarkable, and he had a face that would have been easy to forget if he had let her forget it. And he was standing between her and the path back to the house. "Who are you?" she said. "A man with a question. I only need one answer. Then I'm gone." "What's the question?" "Where was Mr. Vale on the 14th of last month between 9 and midnight?" She did not answer. "Miss Cross." "I don't know." "You do?" "I don't." "You were with him." "I was asleep." "At 9? "I was tired." He smiled. It was not a mean smile. It was patient. It was the smile of a man who had done this many times and was willing to do it once more if he had to. "Okay," he said. "Let me make it easier. I'm going to tell you where he was. I'm going to tell you what he did. And I'm going to ask you, after I tell you, if you want to be in a house with a man who did that. And if the answer is no, I can make the next part of your life much shorter and much easier than the next part of your life is currently going to be. Because the people who sent me are going to find out what he did, Miss Cross. Everyone is going to find out. The only question is whether you're standing next to him when they do, or whether you had the sense to move." Biscuit, up ahead, had stopped and was looking back at her. Lena did not look at Biscuit. She looked at the man. She thought, very clearly, "I am pregnant." And then she thought, "He cannot know that." And then she thought, with a kind of calm that surprised her, "He is not going to touch me, because if he were going to touch me, he would already have touched me. And he is still talking, which means he still thinks I can be moved." She said evenly, "Get off this property." "Miss Cross, you're on private property. You're going to turn around and walk back to wherever you came from. I'm going to walk back to the house. If you try to follow me, I'm going to scream and I'm going to be heard, because there are people on this property who are paid very specifically to hear me scream, and those people are going to find you, and I don't think you're going to like what happens after that." The man tilted his head. "Who taught you to talk like that?" "Nobody." "Somebody." "Nobody." He looked at her for a beat. She could see him doing the calculation, the weight of pressing her against the weight of running, and she could see in his face the moment he decided. "Fair enough," he said. "I'll find you another time." "No, you won't. Miss Cross, you won't. Because you are going to go home tonight, and you are going to tell whoever sent you that I didn't break, and they are going to decide I'm not worth the second try. That's the only reason you came to me first instead of him, because I was the cheaper door. I'm not cheap, so go." He looked at her for another long second. Then he smiled again, and this time it was almost admiring, and he said, "All right." He walked back into the trees. She stood on the path until she could not hear him anymore. She stood for maybe 2 minutes. Biscuit came and sat on her foot. She did not run to the house. She walked, slowly. Her legs had gone to water, but walking was what she could still make her body do, and walking was what she did. When she reached the porch, she sat on the step. She sat for a full minute. Then she put her hand flat against her stomach, not for long, just for the space of one breath, and she got up and she went inside. Margaret was in the hallway. One look at Lena's face, and Margaret said, "What happened?" "A man, on the lake path." "Where?" "Between the dock and the South Bend." "How long ago?" "Less than 10 minutes." Margaret did not ask anything else. She turned and she walked, not ran, walked steadily toward the study. She knocked once. She went in. Lena heard her say Adrian's name, and then Adrian's voice, sharp, asking something, and then Margaret's voice, low, answering. And then Adrian was in the hallway, coat already half on, and he was at Lena in 3 strides, and his hands, for the first time in 2 months, the first time in the whole arrangement, came up and took her face. "Did he touch you?" "No." "Did he touch you?" "No." "Adrian." "No. He didn't touch me. He talked to me. He asked about the 14th. I told him to leave. He left." "He left?" "Yes." "He left because you told him to?" "Yes." Adrian looked at her. He looked at her for a long second, his thumbs at her jaw, his eyes doing that thing they did when he was reading something very fast and very close up. "Lena," he said. "Yes." "You are the first person in my adult life who has made a man like that walk away from a woman by telling him to walk away." "I didn't." "You did. You did that. You did that because you've been in this house for 2 months, and you have learned how to talk to men who were raised to hurt you. And I—" He stopped. He did not finish the sentence. He let go of her face. He took a step back. He turned and he said to Margaret, without raising his voice, "Find him. He came through the south line. Tell them no harm. Tell them I want to talk to him. Tonight, if possible. Tomorrow, if not." "Yes." "Lena goes nowhere on the property alone until I say otherwise." "Yes." "Lena." "Yes." "Come with me." He did not take her hand. He walked, and she walked beside him, and they went up the stairs and into his study, which she had not been in yet. And he closed the door behind her, and he went to the window, and he stood there with his back to her and his hands on the sill, and for a long moment he did not say anything. "Lena." "Yes." "I'm sorry." She did not answer. "I told you," he said, still not turning. "I told you 2 months ago that this could happen. I told you that when you let someone stop being a stranger, the people who want to hurt you stop finding a stranger. I told you, and you said okay, and I let you say okay, and I didn't protect you well enough from what okay cost. He didn't touch me." "He didn't touch you today." "Adrian." "What?" She took a breath. She thought, not this way, not now, not in this room with him standing at the window like that. She thought, yes, this way, now, before there is a second man. "I'm pregnant." He did not move. For 10 full seconds, he did not move. Then he turned. His face had gone very still. It was the stillness that had frightened Caroline Whitmore. It was the stillness that had sat Benjamin Whitmore down at his own table. It was not directed at Lena, but she could feel the edges of it, and she understood, suddenly and completely, why men in rooms did what Adrian Vale told them to do. "How long?" he said. "I took the test on Tuesday." "How long pregnant?" I don't know exactly. I missed last month. I think 7 weeks, maybe? 8? Who knows? Nobody. You. Me. Nobody else. Not Margaret.
Not Inez. The man on the path. He doesn't know, I'm sure. I was wearing a coat. He was looking at my face. Adrian closed his eyes. He closed them and he stood there, and she watched him, and she watched a thing happen to his face that she had never watched happen to anyone's face before. It was as if the last 9 years were being reread, very fast, behind his eyes. It was as if he were looking at the 2 dates at once, the date of the car on the road outside the city and the date of this Friday afternoon, and he was trying to hold them both in the same hand without letting one of them break the other. When he opened his eyes, he was not the same man who had closed them. Something had been put down. Something else had been picked up. He crossed the room to her. He did not take her face this time. He put one hand carefully, almost shyly, against the side of her neck, and the other slowly at the small of her back, and he pulled her just enough into him, and he held her there for about 4 seconds. Not tight, not possessive, just held. Then he let her go. "Okay," he said. "Okay, okay. Sit down." She sat. He sat across from her in the chair at the desk, and he pressed the heels of his hands against his eyes for a moment. And then he lowered them, and he looked at her, and he said very quietly, "I need you to do 3 things for me in the next hour. Will you do them?" "Yes." 1. You do not go outside the walls of this house until I tell you it's safe. Not the porch, not the lake path, not the gravel drive, inside the house only. I know that is a hard thing to ask. I am asking. Yes. 2. We're going to call a doctor I know. She is going to come here this evening. She is going to confirm what you already know, and she is going to make sure you are well, and she is going to start a file that will not be in any system anyone can get into. I will not leave you with her, unless you ask me to. You can decide in the moment. Okay? 3. He paused. 3 is the hardest. 3 is that I need you to trust me for 48 hours. I'm going to make some phone calls. I'm going to go some places. I'm going to come home. I will be in this house by Sunday at the latest. While I'm gone, you are going to be protected here in a way you have not been protected before. You will meet people you have not met. They work for me. They are not going to speak to you unless you speak to them first. You will not like the feeling of them in the house. I don't like it either, but it will be 48 hours, and then the reason they are here will be gone, and they will go too. I'm not going to tell you. Adrian, I'm not going to tell you because I told you once that on nights when I did things, I would ask you not to ask, and this is one of those nights, and I am asking. If I ask anyway, then I'll tell you. But I want you to know first that I am not asking you to approve of anything. I'm not asking you to help. I am asking you to let me be the one who handles this, because this is what I was built for, and because the cost of handling it is a cost I am, for the first time in 9 years, very willing to pay. Because of me. Because of both of you. She did not cry. She had thought she would. She did not. Adrian? Yes. If you come back different, if you come back in a way that means I can't, if you come back and I look at you and I see something I can't live next to, then you go. Just like that. Just like that. Same deal, same money, same door. You walk out. I will not follow you. The child I will support for the rest of my life regardless. And you will never have to ask me for that. And you will never have to see me in order to have it. That is the deal. That has always been the deal. It doesn't change because you're carrying a child. If anything, it gets cleaner. You have more reason to leave than you had yesterday. I will honor it. You think I'm going to leave. I think you should have the option. I'm not going to take the option away from you by being pitiful about it. She looked at him. You are not pitiful, she said. You have never been pitiful. Good. Adrian. Yes. I'm not leaving. Don't say it yet. I'm not going to. Lana. I'm not going to. He did not argue. He simply looked at her, across the desk, and nodded once, and she could see, even from there, that his eyes had gone wet, which was a thing she had never seen them do, and which he did not try to hide. He made the calls. The doctor came at 7. She was in her 50s, gray-haired, sharp-eyed, kind in the way of people who had stopped being surprised by human beings a long time ago. She examined Lena in the bedroom with Margaret present, and she confirmed what Lena already knew. 7 weeks, maybe 8. Heart good. Everything where it should be.
She asked questions. She wrote nothing down. She told Lena before she left that she would come back on Tuesday, and every Tuesday after that, for as long as Lena wanted her to. Adrian left at 9 that night. He did not kiss her before he left. He did not say, "I love you." He had never said it, and he did not say it now. And Lena did not need him to, because she had learned by then what his silences meant. He put his hand on the side of her neck again, briefly, the way he had in the study, and he said, "Sunday." And she said, "Sunday." And he was gone. She did not sleep on Friday night. She did not sleep on Saturday night either. Not really. There were men in the house. Quiet men. Polite men. Men who nodded when she passed them, and who did not look at her twice, and who had guns under their jackets that she was not supposed to see and saw anyway. Margaret moved through the house like a woman who had lived through this before, because she had. Inez cooked as if nothing were different, and when Lena could not eat, Inez did not comment, but kept leaving food on trays in rooms Lena was going to walk through, and eventually Lena ate. Adrian came home on Sunday morning at 11. Lena was in the kitchen. She heard the car. She heard the door. She did not stand up. She did not run to him. She sat at the long wooden table with her hands around a cup of tea, and she waited. And he came through the kitchen door, and he was tired, and he was unhurt, and his coat was over his arm, and he stopped in the doorway when he saw her. "You're still here," he said quietly. "I told you I was going to be." "I know. I'm still here." He crossed the kitchen. He did not sit. He stood next to her chair, and he looked down at her, and he said, "It's done." "What's done?" "The reason he was on the path. The people who sent him. It's done. They are not going to come again. I can tell you the shape of it later if you want. I won't tell you now because you are tired and because you have not asked. Are you okay?" He did not answer immediately. "I'm not proud of the last 36 hours, he said. "I am not ashamed of them either. I did what I said I would do. I did it the way I have been doing things for a long time. I hoped, for 2 months now, I have hoped, that I would not have to do anything like it again. The hope was premature. I'm sorry it was premature. I'm not sorry it is done." "Adrian." "Yes, sit down." He sat down. She reached across the table. She took his hand. His hand was cold. She held it between both of hers, and she looked at him, and she said, "I need to tell you something, and then I need you to listen before you say anything back." "Okay. I am not going to pretend I don't know what you did this weekend. I am not going to ask. I am going to know, and I am going to have to live with knowing. And I don't know yet if I can live with it in a way that doesn't sour me, in a way that doesn't make me, in 20 years, a woman who looks at her own husband across a breakfast table and remembers what he went away for on a Friday afternoon when she was 8 weeks pregnant. I don't know if I can do that. I don't know if any woman can do that well. I'm telling you that because you deserve to hear it, because I don't want to lie to you by pretending everything is simple now, just because you came back in one piece. Okay, I'm not done. Okay, but, and this is the part, I know, Adrian, the way I know my own hand is my hand, that the man you came back as this morning is a man I want near me, and near this child. And I don't think the man you are is the man you did the weekend as. I think the man you did the weekend as is a man you became 9 years ago, for a reason, and he is still useful to you, and he is still, sometimes, the thing that keeps other people alive. And I am not going to be the woman who pretends that man is not in you. And I am not going to be the woman who asks you to kill him. Because the night that man is dead is the night somebody comes for us, and there is nobody in the house who knows what to do." He was looking at her. He was not speaking. "So, here is what I want. I want to stay. I want to have this baby. I want us to... I don't know what the word is. I don't want to be your companion anymore. I don't want to be the woman you paid. I want to be something else, and I don't know the word, but you know what I mean. I know what you mean. I want you to tell me, always, when you have done the thing. You don't have to tell me what, but you have to tell me that. You come home on a Sunday at 11, you sit down at this table, you say, it's done. And I know, and I don't ask, and I don't forget. I carry it quietly. That's the deal, on my side. I carry it quietly, for the rest of our life, and I never throw it at you, and I never use it, and I never forgive you for it in a way that means it didn't happen, because it did happen, and I'm not going to pretend. But I stay. He was still looking at her. His eyes, she realized, were wet again. He was not fighting it this time. Lena, I'm not done. Okay, on your side. On your side, you stop trying to leave doors open for me. You stop telling me every 2 weeks that I can walk. I know I can walk. You told me I could walk on the first night in my kitchen, and you told me again when I got in the car, and you told me again in the study on Friday. I know. I've always known. So stop. Because every time you tell me I can walk, you are telling me, a little, that you expect me to, and I am not going to. And I need you to start, slowly, expecting me to stay. Because if you don't expect it, I'm going to spend the next 40 years of my life having to prove it, and I don't have that in me. Nobody has that in them. He closed his eyes. When he opened them, he said, okay. Just okay. Yes. That's all. That is all. You said it better than I would have. There is nothing I need to add, except that I love you, Lena. I have not said it, and I am going to say it once this morning, at this table, and then I am going to stop saying it for a while, because I don't want it to become a thing I say to you when I come home from a Friday, instead of a thing I say to you on a Tuesday. I love you. I have loved you since you told Caroline Whitmore what she was doing in a room full of ferns. I did not tell you because I did not think you were going to stay. I thought you were going to be the fourth woman who went home to a different city and built a different life. And I thought that telling you I loved you was a way of making that harder for you than it needed to be. I was being careful with you. I see now that I was being careful in a way that did not treat you like an adult. I am sorry for that. She was crying now. She had not cried on the lake path, and she had not cried in the study, and she had not cried through the whole weekend of men in the hallway, and now she was crying, and she did not wipe her face. Adrian, yes, I love you too. I know. You know. I've known for a while. Since when? Since you told me on the second night that you wanted a day in the house before all of it, because the women before you, none of them would have asked for a day. They all wanted to start. You wanted to sit. That's a strange thing to fall in love with somebody over. It's a strange house. It was a strange thing to ask for. It was the right thing to ask for. She laughed, a wet little laugh, and he laughed too, a very small one, and they sat there at the kitchen table, in the late morning sun, holding hands, and Biscuit, who had been on the windowsill the whole time watching them, yawned. The weeks after that were, in a way she had not expected, ordinary. She had thought, when she imagined her life before she understood her life, that this kind of turn would announce itself, that it would be all edges, that every morning she woke would feel different from the morning before. But it was not like that. Mostly it was slow. Mostly it was Inez making toast and Margaret doing the accounts and Thomas driving her to a doctor's appointment in town, and Adrian working in the study with the door half open so she could walk in whenever she wanted. Mostly it was Biscuit getting older and slower and still, on good afternoons, galloping up the stairs ahead of her like he was 3. Mostly it was her belly rounding, week by week, and Adrian's hand at it sometimes, in the evening, not speaking, just resting there, as if he were learning something by touch that he was not going to learn any other way. They got married in March, at the house, with 11 people. Margaret cried. Thomas did not cry, but his mouth moved in a way that, for Thomas, was crying. Inez baked a cake that was so beautiful, Lena almost did not want to cut it. Biscuit wore a small bow tie, briefly, and then removed it in protest. Adrian's sister flew in from Geneva and did not speak much, but she held Lena's hand during the ceremony and said, in the kitchen afterward quietly, "He's better than he was. Thank you." And Lena said, "He did it himself. I just watched." And Adrian's sister looked at her for a long second and said, "No, you didn't." The baby came in May. It was a Tuesday. It was raining, the way it had been raining on the night Lena had first met Adrian in the kitchen at the Meridian Hotel. A thin, steady rain that washed the windows clean. And Lena was in labor for 14 hours, and Adrian was in the room the whole time, and he held her hand so hard that she had a bruise on the back of her wrist for 4 days afterward, which he apologized for every time he saw it, and which she told him to stop apologizing for, because she liked it. She liked that he had held on. Holding on was a skill he had not been born with. They named her Elena, after Lena's mother, who had been Evelyn, but also, Lena thought privately and never said out loud, a little bit for Lena herself, because she had started, in the last year, to believe she had been two people her whole life, and the Lena who had come into this house had been the one who was finally given room to walk around. Adrian held the baby in the hospital room 10 minutes after she was born. He held her the way he had never in his life held anything, tentatively, precisely, with both hands around her like a cup of something too hot to drink. He was crying without realizing he was crying. He said, looking down at his daughter, "Hello, hello. Hi, hi there." And his voice broke on the third hi, and Lena watched him from the bed, and she thought, this is the whole thing. This is the whole reason any of this happened. If anyone ever asks me why, this is the answer. She thought also, 6 months ago I was scrubbing pans. She thought Marco is probably, right now, still yelling at somebody. She thought, Mrs. Ochoa in 2B doesn't even know where I went. She had written to Mrs. Ochoa eventually. She had sent a card, and then another card. She had sent money, once, without her name on it, the way rich people in movies did, except Lena had not been able to help herself and had included a small note that said from Lena upstairs, "Biscuit says hi." Mrs. Ochoa, according to Margaret, who had somehow found out these things without Lena asking, had framed the note. 3 days after Elena was born, Lena came home to the house that had been waiting for her. She came up the gravel drive in the back of Thomas's car with her daughter in her arms. And when the car pulled around the courtyard, Margaret and Inez were both on the steps. Margaret with her hands folded, Inez with an apron still on. And Biscuit was on the low wall beside them, upright, tail curled around his paws, looking exactly like what he was, which was a cat who had been waiting for his person to come back. "Welcome home, Miss Elena," Margaret said quietly to the baby, and Inez stepped forward and took the baby for just long enough that Lena could get out of the car. And there was no speech about it, no big moment, just the particular rough warmth of being handed your baby back on your own front steps by a woman who had been, slowly, for almost a year, the closest thing to family Lena had left. There are things, Lena came to believe in the years after, that a person can only learn one way. She had grown up believing that safety was a door with 3 locks and a bat behind it. She had grown up believing that love was a thing men said to you to get you to do something, and that if a man had said it to her without wanting anything, she would have known he was lying. She had grown up believing that her life was going to be small, not because she was small, but because small was what her pocket could afford. And she had made peace with that the way you make peace with a low ceiling in a room you can't leave. What she had not known, what she had not been in a position to know, was that some doors did open, and some of the doors that opened were the wrong doors, and some of them were the right doors. And you could not always tell which was which on the first night, and sometimes you had to walk through anyway. She had walked through Adrian Vale's door because her mother's hospital bill had been bigger than her life, and she had stayed in his house because his kitchen had smelled like someone wanted her to eat, and she had married him because he had learned, in 2 months, how to stop offering her the exit every time he was afraid, and she had stayed married to him because he kept, year after year, doing the one thing she had asked him to do, coming home on a Sunday at 11, when he had been away on a Friday, sitting down at the long wooden table and saying it's done. She carried it quietly. She had promised she would. Elena grew up in that house. She learned to walk on the rug in the sitting room where Biscuit had claimed the 200-year-old chair, and Biscuit, who did not, it turned out, die as soon as the vet had once feared, but lived another 6 good years on prescription food and warm laps, was her first friend. She had her grandmother's name and her father's gray eyes and her mother's careful, stubborn mouth. And she grew up, mostly, like a girl who did not know exactly what her family was. And her parents agreed, without ever saying it in words, that this was for the best, for a while. And one night, when Elena was almost 5, Lena stood at the window of the upstairs hall, looking out at the lawn, and Adrian came up behind her and put his hand lightly on the back of her neck, and she said without turning, "Do you ever think about how it started?" "Sometimes." "Would you do it again?" He was quiet for a moment. "I wouldn't do most of it again," he said. "I wouldn't walk into a kitchen in the middle of the night and hand a woman a card and think that was a clean thing to do to her. I wouldn't pretend for 2 months that I hadn't fallen in love with her. I wouldn't make her ask me to expect her to stay. I did a lot of things wrong, Lena. I did them because I didn't know how to do them right. If I had known how to do them right, I would have. But you'd still come. He thought about it. Yes, he said. I'd still come. I'd just come in the front door in the morning with flowers, like a person. She laughed, a short, quiet laugh, and she leaned back against his chest and down on the lawn, somewhere in the dusk. Their daughter was running with the dog they had gotten the year before. A large, slow-witted creature who adored Elena in a way Biscuit, watching from the porch, considered embarrassing. And Lena watched her daughter run, and she thought about her own mother, who had not lived to see any of this, and who would have probably hated the house and loved the child, and made peace with Adrian over a very long period of time, and possibly never entirely. And Lena thought, you gave me everything, Mom, in the end. You did. It just took a while to land. Adrian. Yes. Thank you for coming to the kitchen that night. Thank you for not throwing the card away. I almost did. I know. You don't know. I do. I called Thomas the next morning at 7. He told me you hadn't called yet. I told him to drive to your building anyway and wait, just in case. You never told me that. I know. She smiled against his shoulder. You were sure I'd call. No. I was hopeful you would. There's a difference. Sure is what you have when you already know. Hope is what you have when you don't, and you show up anyway. She stood at the window for a long time, with his hand warm on the back of her neck, and their daughter screaming with laughter on the grass below, and behind them somewhere the old cat sleeping in the dark, and the house, the strange quiet house she had walked into one gray morning a long time ago, carrying a duffel bag and a carrier and a life she had not expected to keep, settling around them all, the way a house does when the right people finally live in it. She had been invisible once. She remembered that. She remembered the fluorescent light and the split knuckles and the bus that was always late and the woman on the bench under the green wool blanket. She remembered the $11.43 and the cup of instant ramen on the hot plate. She did not romanticize it. She did not pretend it had been a teacher. It had been a thing she had survived, and surviving was not the same as being shaped, and she refused, even in memory, to let it be more than what it was. But she had walked that night out of her own kitchen and into somebody else's. And the walk had been 6 paces, and it had taken 6 months, and then 6 years, and it had been, in the end, worth every pan, every bus, every rain, every rent, because it had ended here, with a daughter she could hear laughing through a second-story window, and a man at her back who had stopped telling her she could leave, and a life that had started as a deal between strangers and had, without her exactly noticing when, become the only life she could imagine having had. Outside, the dog barked. Elena shouted something back at him, in the language children invent when they are too happy to use the ones they know. Lena turned in Adrian's arms. Come on, she said. Come downstairs. It's almost dark. She'll want you to carry her in. She can walk. She can. But she'll want you to. Fine. He kissed the top of her head. Once. Unhurried. The way he had been kissing her for years, as if there were no reason to rush, because there wasn't, because they were here, and they were going to be here in the morning, and in the morning after that. They went downstairs together. The house held them, the way a house holds the people who have finally decided to stay. And outside, on the lawn, in the long blue dusk, their daughter was still running.